Chapter 882. Zhanshan City had already fallen. Although he didn't know what was going on in the Hengduan Mountains, what was certain was that the Northern Army and the demon beasts were basically hopeless. At this juncture, those with a bit of ability would try to run towards Shunning City, or directly go out and look for the southern expedition. That place was much safer than the Hengduan Mountains where the Undyings were wreaking havoc. Therefore, in the vicinity of the Blackwater Dragon King Temple in Zhanshan City, either those who had a duty like the temple attendant couldn't run away, or those who didn't have the ability to travel a long distance couldn't escape. Therefore, they were trapped in the vicinity of the Blackwater Dragon King Temple. Lin Yuan really didn't have much hope for these people's fighting strength. Building temporary fortifications and waiting for the other garrisons to receive the news and come to support was obviously not feasible. Not to mention whether these people could hold on for a long time, Lin Yuan just carefully calculated. There were many fierce people in the Blackwater army who could break through the enemy's formation, but the problem was that these Undyings couldn't be killed at all. Their intelligence wasn't high, and their morale was completely non-existent. In this situation where the two armies were facing each other, they were almost like rogues. They couldn't be killed, and they couldn't be dispersed. Therefore, even if those fierce people came, it would be good enough if he could kill his way out. Wanting to take away these survivors who were staying near the Blackwater Dragon King Temple was tantamount to a fool's dream. Li Zhong, are there any large gathering places of the Undyings nearby? Lin Yuan turned his head to look at Li Zhong and asked in a deep voice. After all, the current strength of this body was not much stronger than a wild beast. The eye of the god was disturbed by the dark energy, so running around with his eyes closed was no different from courting death. To the north, there is a forest near the Hengduan Mountains. There are tens of thousands of humanoid immortals with white bodies. They move very fast, like apes in the forest. Because they always make hungry sounds and like to drag their prey into the forest to tear and devour, we call that forest the Forest of the Hungry Dead. A little to the east is a pitch-black plain. That used to be a part of mountain-blocking city, but now all the crops have died. What grew out of the ground are pale and broken human arms. Once you enter that area by mistake, you will be grabbed by those arms and even torn to shreds. That place is called the Earth Plain by us. Li Zhong carefully recalled for a moment, and then said with certainty, there are only these two powerful gathering places of the undead near mountain-blocking city. However, other than the areas we still control, the other gathering places in the northern frontier rarely contact us. Due to the shortage of manpower, they haven't come here to investigate the situation for some time. I'm not sure if there are any new gathering places of the undead, but when I came here, I followed the old map I drew in the past and didn't see any powerful characters. Forest of the Undead, Earth Plain. Lin Yuan's eyes looked a little cold, and he said in a deep voice, go to the places you control. These two areas are the only way. You can't only consider how to evacuate the cultivators above the airborne realm. What about the ordinary people and cultivators below the airborne realm? Are you, as the king of the northern frontier, just going to watch them die? Although Li Zhong looked a little embarrassed and tired, he still had the cultivation of the Heaven Dipper realm. Under full power, the speed of flying in the air was much faster than the fighter jets in Lin Yuan's previous life. Moreover, there was no need to consider the terrain, so naturally, he could take any route. However, although the people gathered near the Blackwater Dragon King Temple had not yet gathered, Lin Yuan was sure that ordinary people definitely occupied the majority. The remaining cultivators and monsters were probably not very high in cultivation. They might not even have reached the airborne realm, so they could only walk obediently. This meant that he had to choose between the Forest of the Undead and the Earth Plain. Li Zhong rubbed his face a little irritably and said in a deep voice, Lord Dragon King, you can't say it like that. Sometimes, it's necessary to give up. Beautiful reunion stories only exist in stories. Reality has always been bloody. In my opinion, all the people here are not as important as 1/10,000th of you, so, **t. Lin Yuan interrupted Li Zhong with an expressionless face and said with a gloomy face, the path of retreat is for ordinary people. Since you bear the title of the Northern Frontier King, you have to bear the responsibility of the Northern Frontier King. Necessary sacrifices can be made, but you don't even think of a way and directly announce to give up on those ordinary people and low-level cultivators. This kind of behavior, what's the difference between this and surrendering without a fight? Li Zhong pursed his lips and did not say anything. I'll give you 300 Heaven Dipper Realm cultivators. Find a way to mix them into the team and be responsible for clearing the way and clearing the approaching undead. I don't ask you to bring everyone out alive, but I hope you can do some self-reflection and think about how you should be responsible for your own people as the king of the northern frontier. The 300 Heaven Dipper Realm cultivators that Lin Yuan mentioned were chosen from the temple attendants and guards of the Blackwater Dragon King Temple. After all, they were created by the system. He directly imbued them with attribute points and let them get used to their new powers. Soon, they would be able to join the battle. Li Zhong did not doubt Lin Yuan's methods. He just instinctively felt that Lin Yuan was acting very strange after returning. Not only did he impart a very profound cultivation technique to him, but the choice at this moment was also not in line with his style. It was not that Lin Yuan did not care about human lives in the past. It was just that Lin Yuan would usually choose the most efficient and most beneficial choice for himself. But now, could it be that these ordinary people and low-level cultivators were more beneficial to Lin Yuan if they were alive? Li Zhong could not understand this point. After all, 300 Heaven Dipper Realm cultivators might not be able to protect the people here and escape unscathed. However, it would not take long for them to kill everyone here. Even if everything went smoothly and they could bring everyone here away, it would be a huge loss if more than 10 Heaven Dipper Realm cultivators died in the battle. How did they calculate this debt? Incense. Seeing Li Zhong's puzzled look, Lin Yuan calmly reminded him. The reason why the people here could survive the fall of Zhanshan City and the other colonies was because of the protection of the Blackwater Dragon King Temple. As long as they could continue to live, it was only a matter of time before they became his followers. Moreover, the power of incense did not depend on cultivation level. The amount of power of incense produced at each level of faith was fixed. The more people there were, the more power of incense would be produced. There was no such thing as a single person being able to fight against an army of thousands. Purely from the perspective of incense, it would be a profit if 80% of these 300 Heaven Dipper Realm cultivators survived. Chapter 883. Li Zhong pondered for a moment before nodding indifferently. He turned around and walked toward the temple, preparing to deploy the formation. Although he was far from the point where he needed to accumulate the power of incense, the foundation that Lin Yuan had laid for him was not bad. Coupled with the cultivation method that Lin Yuan had just passed down, those people of the northern frontier who had set up temples for him, the Northern Frontier King, would become his source of incense. As long as the northern frontier was strong enough, becoming a true god would be a sure thing. Although the Blackwater Dragon King Temple was not small, it was not worth mentioning compared to the northern frontier. Although it sheltered many people, it added up to only about 10,000 people, and most of them were ordinary people without cultivation. A few cultivators were mixed in the team, and most of them were at the mortal evolution state. Even the airborne state was not very common. Moreover, their clothes did not look luxurious. All kinds of leather and iron armor were mixed together. It was hard to say how defensive it was, but it was really ugly. These low-level cultivators were at the bottom of the cultivation realm. Even mortal evolution state cultivators were only slightly stronger and faster than ordinary people. Even if they hadn't stepped into the cultivation realm, some powerful martial artists could deal with them. In a battle between cultivation forces, these people weren't even considered cannon fodder. Even if they had a few lives, it wouldn't be enough to survive a battle. Let's go. Li Zhong's voice sounded from afar. The Northern Region King took the lead and personally led 50 Heavenly Dipper Realm cultivators to form a spearhead. Taking advantage of the fact that the immortals hadn't piled up to the point of numbing one's scalp, they threw out all kinds of spells as if they were free. Their weapons were also accompanied by dense aura energy. Even cultivators of the same realm wouldn't dare to take this level of attack head-on. However, to those undead, it was no different from a slap from a child. They did not even have the intention to dodge. In an instant, a large number of them were sent flying. However, their injuries were not serious. Although it seemed that their flesh was torn and their bones were shattered, they had mostly healed before the undead could get up. The most ridiculous thing was that among these undead, there were many who had their limbs cut off, and at this moment, they were rapidly growing new limbs. The terrifying recovery ability made Lin Yuan's scalp numb. In the past, when he relied on the underworld creatures to bully people, he did not feel it. Now that he suddenly encountered something as disgusting as them, he realized that he did not have any good way to deal with these guys. The low-level cultivators who were slowly moving forward in the group, as well as warriors, hunters, and other existences who relied on force to make a living, reacted at this moment. They took the specially strengthened spears from the hands of the old, weak, women, and children walking in the middle of the group. Before the undead could completely stand up, they fiercely thrust the spears in their hands and directly nailed the undead to the ground. Lin Yuan could clearly see that although the undead's movements were temporarily restricted, their flesh and blood were constantly squirming, as if they were trying to squeeze out the spears that pierced their flesh and blood. It seemed that those special spears would not be able to last long. The remaining Heavenly Dipper State cultivators, as well as the Airborne Realm cultivators who were selected from the survivors, all kept running along the group, knocking away the undead who were trying to struggle out one by one, or adding a stab to the undead who were still struggling. Overall, the momentum was not bad. If nothing unexpected happened, it would not be difficult to kill their way out of the encirclement of these undead. The main problem now was whether to take a detour into the Hengduan Mountains and pass through to a safe area, or to pass through the Hungry Ghost Forest and the Earth Plain and fight. After all, there were not many routes to choose from after bringing these ordinary people and low-level cultivators. Moreover, the current information on the northern frontier was so vague that it made people's hair stand on end. Other than those dangerous areas that were already known, there were no other dangers or the situation inside the Hengduan Mountains. These are all walking corpses, the lowest level of undead. They don't have high spiritual intelligence and are only slightly stronger than ordinary beasts. Moreover, these things have no vision and mainly rely on their sense of smell and hearing to track their prey. In addition to these characteristics, they are extremely strong and walk like they are flying. One step is already comparable to 3 or 4 steps of ordinary people on our side. The temple attendant in charge of protecting Lin Yuan softly introduced the characteristics of these undead to Lin Yuan and slowly said, "If you encounter these walking corpses on flat ground, even low-level cultivators may not be able to escape. After all, these things are very vengeful and have excellent patience. When they are sure that they can catch up with their prey, they will not give up no matter what. In contrast, humans need to rest." Lin Yuan wrapped around the temple attendant's arm and wondered, the undead in the vicinity seem to be these walking corpses, which means that we have to escape into the forest area. Otherwise, they will catch up with us sooner or later. Is that so? Yes. The temple attendant nodded heavily and explained, these walking corpses have no vision and their movements are very fast. The only way to get rid of them is to escape into a place with complicated terrain. After all, these things don't know how to take a detour or restrain their strength. Just a few turns will make them dizzy from bumping into trees. At that time, it will be very easy to escape. In other words, these things are forcing me to go to the Hungry Ghost Forest. In any case, Lin Yuan was also an existence that came out of the Hengduan Mountains. His original foothold was the monster forest outside the Hengduan Mountains. Lin Yuan was no stranger to the forest near Mountain Bar City. Although he had never been to the Hungry Ghost Forest and did not see the relevant map, he quickly guessed the location of the Hungry Ghost Forest. That was the place where a large number of Shen Lin Jun's reserve troops were killed. Now, these Shen Lin Jun's reserve troops seemed to have been awakened by the evil god and became the undead that were even more terrifying than the walking corpses. However, crossing the Hungry Ghost Forest was originally Lin Yuan's plan from the beginning. First, that area was close to the Hengduan Mountains. He also wanted to see the current situation of the Hengduan Mountains. If the Hungry Ghost Forest really did not work, he could only choose to enter the Hengduan Mountains and take a detour. From the beginning, Lin Yuan did not consider the earth plane. To put it bluntly, without a certain level of strength, even cultivators would not be able to escape from that place. What was the difference between bringing a large number of ordinary people into the earth plane and sending those undead outside? The monsters in that place were all things that suddenly drilled out from the ground. They were not something that cultivators could take care of. In their team, they did not have such extravagant manpower that they could use. Chapter 884. Let's head north and see if we can walk through the Hengduan mountain range. If we really can't, then we'll force our way through the hungry ghost forest. Tell everyone to be careful. Lin Yuan took a deep breath and tightly wrapped her arms around the temple attendant's arm. Her mood was a little complicated. Just as the temple attendant said, although the gathering of undyings was troublesome and large in number, they were only the lowest level of walking corpses. After leaving the protection area of the Blackwater Dragon King Temple, they could casually see a large number of walking corpses. The survivors who made a living in this area were already used to it. As long as they weren't entangled by these low-level undyings, escaping wasn't much of a problem. Moreover, there were many Heaven Dipper realm cultivators in the surroundings who would occasionally send some walking corpses flying, relieving the pressure on the entire group. However, Lord Dragon King, those hungry ghosts are still a little troublesome. The temple attendant sighed softly and slowly said, although the hungry ghosts aren't the main force of the undyings, they already have considerable intelligence. They often hide by the roadside or in the woods and emit the cries of women or children to lure the cultivators passing by. Many people have fallen for it. Moreover, the hungry ghosts never devour prey in their hunting areas. Once they catch prey, they will drag it back to their nest and trap it there. They will slowly enjoy it after a day of hunting. Therefore, it's very difficult to find traces of the hungry ghosts just by looking at the environment. If it wasn't for the fact that too many people went missing in the hungry ghost forest when the northern frontier just turned into the underworld and the northern frontier king specially organized an investigation team, the existence of the hungry ghost forest would probably still be unknown. At this point, Miao Zhu touched his right cheek. There was a claw mark that almost caused half of his face to curl up. It was obvious that this claw mark came from some kind of beast. Miao Zhu was quite tenacious. Even with half of his face cut open, he didn't die. Touching the claw marks on his face, the temple attendant said faintly, "Previously, I encountered a few hungry ghosts. In a moment of kindness, I almost lost my life. These fellows rarely move alone. Even the smallest group usually has 3 to 5 hungry ghosts. Their usual movements are no different from ordinary humans, even slightly stiff. However, once they enter battle mode, their pouncing speed is not inferior to those high-level wisdom realm demonic beasts. Coupled with their undying characteristics, even Heaven Dipper realm cultivators would find it hard to survive if they were to tangle with them. The difference between each level of the undying could be said to be like heaven and earth. The hungry ghosts weren't existences that could be shaken off just by relying on the terrain. This was also the reason why the hungry ghost forest was comparable to a danger zone. These kinds of fast and undying things could tear a team like theirs apart in the blink of an eye if there were tens of thousands of them. Lin Yuan closed his eyes tightly and felt a sense of helplessness in his heart. Unless he used a large amount of Joss flames to raise the cultivation of this clone to the same level as his main body, he could only use the power of the underworld realm's black water. Although using this kind of power at this juncture could effectively fight against those undying, it would also accelerate the process of the northern frontier's underworld realm transformation. Every bit of underworld chi that contaminated the land now would take a longer time to cleanse it with spirit chi in the future. Lord Dragon King, I've confirmed that the Hengduan mountain range is also very chaotic now. Those who are loyal to the Beast Lord Kirin and those who want to take the opportunity to take the throne are fighting fiercely. There are also some neutral parties who are fighting fiercely with the Inferno demon beasts and the Undying, but most of the situations are not good. It's fine if our caravan takes some safer routes. After all, those demon beasts are fighting fiercely now and can't take care of the supplies of our caravan. But if you enter the Hengduan mountain range... Li Zhong let go of a demon bird that was delivering a letter. He looked at Lin Yuan with a complicated expression, his face full of hesitation. Lin Yuan was silent. He had almost forgotten that the position of the Beast Lord of the Hengduan mountain range had almost been taken away by Incubus. All the tribes had been in the stage of fighting openly and secretly, all wanting to sit on the position of the Beast Lord of the Hengduan mountain range. Lin Yuan himself was also an existence that Incubus thought highly of. He also expanded the northern frontier for the Hengduan mountain range, established the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce, and brought a lot of benefits and convenience to the demon beasts in the Hengduan mountain range. The three beast lords also had a good impression of Lin Yuan. Some tribes that had no hope of competing for the beast lord's position also thought highly of Lin Yuan. He was a strong competitor for the beast lord's position. Now that the Hengduan mountain range was in a mess, not to mention whether the evil god was still in the Hengduan mountain range. Even if he was not, those who wanted to compete for the beast lord's position would not watch Lin Yuan do whatever he wanted. Even if they could not capture or kill Lin Yuan, they would most likely chase Lin Yuan away. Damn it, cerebral palsy. Lin Yuan cursed in a low voice. Although he did not know why the demon beasts in the Hengduan mountain range had betrayed Incubus before, now that the Undying and the Purgatory demon beasts were on the rise, he did not believe that the various tribes in the Hengduan mountain range would have an easy time. At this time, they did not unite to deal with the Undying and the Purgatory demon beasts, and even wanted to take advantage of the absence of Incubus to conquer the Hengduan mountain range. If this behavior was not cerebral palsy, what was it? After thinking for a moment, Lin Yuan glanced at the team that was approaching the forest, and then turned his head to look at the undead that was chasing behind. Then he sighed faintly and asked, "I don't know the specific combat power of the Hungry Ghost Forest. You have been in the northern frontier all this time. Roughly estimate, with our current strength, what is the probability of breaking through the Hungry Ghost Forest?" Li Zhong was silent for a moment, and then said with a bitter face, "If there is no external help, the pattern of us passing through the Hungry Ghost Forest is almost zero. I estimate that we will not be able to go far before most of the ordinary people in the team will die, followed by the low-level cultivators. If we go deep into the Hungry Ghost Forest, I can't guarantee what kind of monsters we will encounter, and we may not even be able to get out." Speaking of this, Li Zhong lowered his head in shame, and said with a mosquito-like voice, "When the Hungry Ghost Forest was first discovered, it attracted our high attention. Senior Wine Sword Mystery organized a large number of experts of the Association of the Demon Emperor to go to the Hungry Ghost Forest, but less than 20% of them came out, including Senior Wine Sword Mystery. Their whereabouts are currently unknown. As the capital of Lin Yuan's fortune, although the Association of the Demon Emperor was divided into different organizations, and its power was weakened again and again, its comprehensive strength was always the strongest force in the northern frontier. Putting aside those mercenaries who worked for the bounty, the strength of the Association of the Demon Emperor was absolutely enough to crush Wine Sword Mystery, who was in the same realm. With the resources of the northern frontier, it was estimated that it would not take long for Wine Sword Mystery to break through to the Kongming realm and become one of the guardians of the northern frontier. But now, Wine Sword Mystery was most likely dead. Chapter 885. Under the command of Li Zhong, the whole team walked into the forest of hungry ghosts in an orderly manner. The temple attendant who was responsible for protecting Lin Yuan was at the back of the team, in charge of blocking the zombies that were chasing after them. Although the Eye of God was still unable to be used, Lin Yuan could see the grey death chi in the forest as soon as he opened his eyes. Ta! 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 The sound of footsteps and the sound of branches breaking could be heard one after another. Even without using their eyes, they knew that a large number of things were approaching their team from the forest of hungry ghosts. The zombies that had been chasing after them also stopped at this moment. They used their inferior intelligence to show the instincts of a weak creature when encountering a strong predator. They almost did not hesitate to give up on the living humans that they loathed, turned around and rushed in the same direction. Their speed was even faster than when they were chasing Lin Yuan and the others by more than 3 times. Hungry ghosts. Lin Yuan looked at the monsters in the surrounding forest and on the branches of the trees and softly muttered. Compared to the hungry ghosts in the myths of his previous life who had small mouths, thin throats, big stomachs and could not eat anything. The hungry ghosts in the Tianwu world did look better, but it was not much better. Their pale and bloodless skin looked strange as if it was covered with a thick layer of powder. Their scarlet eyes were no different from the eyes of a normal person, but the blood vessels in the whites of their eyes were all prominent. They seemed to be enduring great pain all the time. Saliva dripped from the corner of their mouth from time to time. At the same time, when they opened their mouth, 2 rows of crisscrossed sharp teeth like shark teeth could be seen. Whoosh! A sharp sound broke through the air. Lin Yuan's expression changed slightly. He almost subconsciously tightened his grip on the temple attendant's hand, and used all his strength to fling it upwards. However, with the current basic attributes of his external incarnation, it was completely unable to move a Heaven Dipper realm cultivator. The basic strength of both sides was not at the same level. However, the temple attendant's reaction was very fast. The moment Lin Yuan moved, he had already flung his arm according to Lin Yuan's rhythm. A ray of cold light suddenly appeared. The temple attendant's flinging arm almost brushed against the cold light. Crack! A huge tree that required 5 adults to wrap their arms around made a loud noise and fell towards the ground. What is this? The temple attendant lost his voice and his face was filled with fear. Being able to slice through the tree might seem frightening, but to be honest, it might not be able to pierce through a Heaven Dipper realm cultivator's protective aura and injure the cultivator himself. However, the speed of the attack was incomparably fast. If it wasn't for Lin Yuan's terrifying sense of danger, this attack would have taken his life. From the very beginning, it had been targeting Lin Yuan. As the tree fell to the ground, the dust, wood shavings, and gravel that were sent flying into the air fell to the ground. The cold gleam was revealed. A 3-foot-3 green longsword was nailed to the back of the tree stump. The hilt of the sword was still trembling slightly, as if it had not reached the tree stump, but had been forcefully stopped. A translucent figure slowly condensed beside the long sword, gradually showing the appearance of wine sword mystery. As the figure continued to condense, the skin was turning scarlet. The pair of eyes that could no longer be distinguished from the pupils and the whites of the eyes were all ferocious, like an angry hedgehog. Just by looking at it from afar, one would be intimidated. Incarnation of Azura, Lin Yuan murmured softly, and his eyes began to become dignified. When Buddhism talked about the 6 paths of reincarnation, there were 3 good paths and 3 evil paths. The path of heaven, the path of humanity and the path of Azura were the 3 good paths. However, the path of Azura was actually not the true good path. It was just that those who could fall into the path of Azura were much more fortunate than those who fell into the 3 evil paths. Those who fell into the path of Azura were all people who harbored resentment in their hearts and loved to fight. Basically, they were all fierce generals and valiant heroes. The moment they entered the path of Azura, they would become Azura. From then on, they would fight to the death day and night without any other desires. They did not even need to rest. The entire path of Azura was filled with battle maniacs. They would constantly reincarnate and kill. Every time they killed, every time they reincarnated, it would make the Azura stronger and more terrifying. Right now, the path of reincarnation in the Sky Martial world was incomparably crude. After the northern frontier gradually turned into the underworld, it gradually began to be perfected. The wine sword mystery in front of him who died in the forest of hungry ghosts and turned into Azura was probably the first Azura in the world. Everything in the world could not escape from a beginning and an end. In the rules, 1 was a very unique number. It often represented a special meaning. Most of the time, as long as any creature had a title related to 1, it often represented that they were unrivaled in their race and could look down on the world with disdain. For example, the primordial chaos creatures, those who could become famous almost all had the benefits of 1. For example, Red Cloud Daoist was the first Red Cloud in the Eldritch world to attain Dao. Also, in the 3 races that were once incomparably powerful, the Ancestral Dragon, the Original Phoenix and the First Kirin, these 3 were also existences that could directly crush all the other races. This also reflected the fact that the wine sword mystery was not an easy person to deal with. Being targeted by such an existence, even if Lin Yuan was already mentally prepared, he still felt a chill in his heart. After all, Asuras were things that could not be killed. Even if you crushed them into pieces, they would be reborn in a short period of time. Then, with a roar that was mixed with excitement and anger, they would once again pounce towards their opponent. Not to mention, before this, Wine Sword Mystery had already suppressed the peak of the Heaven Dipper realm and killed him with 5 swords. After transforming into an Asura, he would only be stronger. Furthermore, he would be able to continuously absorb nutrients from the endless battles, making himself stronger and stronger. Dragon King, you go first. I will deal with him. Li Zhong's body flashed and stood between the Wine Sword Mystery and the temple attendant. He narrowed his eyes and said. After all, he was the human king of the northern frontier. Even if he was a puppet supported by Lin Yuan, he was still cautious and conscientious in governing the northern frontier. During this period of time, he had accumulated some king's qi, which was just enough to suppress the fierce generals who had transformed into Asuras. Even if it was other existences who had transformed into Asuras, they would also be suppressed to a certain extent. We can't get out by ourselves. At this juncture, even if Lin Yuan was reluctant to give up these walking incense power, he had to recognize the reality. When he came to the northern frontier, he was afraid that he had already fallen into the perception of the evil god. Whether it was the walking dead coming from all directions or the change of the situation in the Hengduan Mountains, they were all for Lin Yuan to fill in his standard answer for a multiple-choice question. Even, Lin Yuan's use of this incarnation might have the interference of the evil god. Chapter 886. Even a true god couldn't do it as he wished, let alone Lin Yuan, who relied on the power of the system and barely used the power of incense. Before he returned to the northern region, he didn't even think that he would be using that avatar. He also didn't expect that things would turn out this way. This time, he had truly stepped into the other party's trap. Under the other party's interference, he arrived at the Blackwater Dragon King Temple near Mountain Blocking City. Before he sensed the crisis, he didn't choose to decisively give up the ordinary survivors. Instead, he tried to bring most of them to a safe place alive. So, he bumped into the gift that the other party prepared for him in the Hungry Ghost Forest. I was careless. Lin Yuan whispered softly. The reason why he ended up in this situation was because he underestimated the enemy too much. After all, the Transcendent Realm humans and the Ancestor Demon Realm beasts were all under his control in the Endless Sea. Although he knew that his identity was special at that time, and there was a mysterious organization that intimidated the indigenous creatures in the Tianwu world, Lin Yuan still couldn't help but despise the existence of this realm. Even if it was a trivial thought, it was enough to push him into the abyss at the critical moment. Master Dragon King, leave quickly. Li Zhong gently waved his hand. His eyes stared at the Wine Sword Mystic and said in a deep voice, even if I die, I will. Before he finished his words, he was interrupted by Lin Yuan's cold snort. Actually, you don't have the talent to be an actor. I just didn't think of it before, but now. Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes slightly and murmured, actually, from the moment you appeared in front of me, you have already revealed your flaws. Logically speaking, without my order and without special circumstances, you are not allowed to leave Shunning City. Now, the pressure on the Wei River battlefield has been greatly reduced, and the Sky Demon is slowly retreating. Although you said that there is no need to guard the front line, no matter from which perspective, you shouldn't appear in front of me so quickly. Speaking of this, Lin Yuan paused and ridiculed, isn't that right, Brother Lei? Ha ha ha, ha 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 ha. Li Zhong was first taken aback by Lin Yuan's words and then he began to laugh maniacally. Amidst his laughter, his body began to twist and contort, gradually transforming into Lei Fan's appearance. He was similarly delicate and handsome, different from the boorish northern frontier people. Both Li Zhong and Lei Fan were from the Central Plains, near the south. Both of them exuded a unique aura, less ferocious and more gloomy. Lei Fan turned around slowly with a smile on his face. His eyes narrowed slightly as he said, it's been a long time, Black Snake. No, I mean Lord Dragon King. The gift that I have prepared for you, is it to your liking? When his voice fell, the smile on Lei Fan's face had already disappeared. He looked coldly at Lin Yuan, with neither sorrow nor joy on his face. One could not tell that he hated Lin Yuan for stripping him of his position as the king of the northern frontier back then, nor could one see the slightest joy from dragging Lin Yuan into a dead end. The Tao of Azura and the Tao of Hungry Ghost. 2 of the 6 Tao have appeared. Although I do not like the methods of Buddhism, I have to say, you, or the one behind you, are indeed quite capable. Lin Yuan also had the same emotionless look on his face as he said indifferently, if it wants to establish the netherworld before me and become the netherworld king of this world, then I would be more than happy to oblige. Not only would I not interfere, I would even lend it a helping hand. But the problem is, the 2 of you do not want to go anywhere but instead, you want to bring disaster to the northern frontier. If that is the case, then I will have to talk to the 2 of you. As if Lin Yuan had said a joke, the corners of Lin Yuan's mouth opened again and he said with a smile, with just you? Although I do not like that fellow as well, but I have to say that his calculations are on point. Lord Dragon King, you are now in a dead end. Save your own life first before you come and fight with us. After saying that, he waved his hand at Lin Yuan and the smile on his face did not change. Goodbye, if we can meet again. As his voice fell, Lei Fan's figure gradually melted into the death aura, until he completely disappeared. Lin Yuan took a deep breath and his gaze swept across the group of survivors whose faces were gradually filled with fear and he said loudly, the 2 of you, if you do not make a move now, then this trip will be in vain. At the same time his voice fell, a pool of blood exploded. A hungry ghost that was pouncing towards the temple attendant was pinched in mid-air by a formless force and was then crushed into pieces. When it fell to the ground, it had already become a mass of flesh and blood that was wriggling non-stop, as if it was struggling to heal itself. But that formless force was filled with ruthlessness as it continued to crush the mass of flesh and blood on the ground, until the mass of flesh had been crushed into meat paste before it stopped. The surrounding ground looked as if it had been trampled by thousands upon thousands of mammoths, filled with cracks. The area where the mass of flesh and blood had been smashed into a large crater close to 100 meters deep. Too bloody bloody bloody. Lin Yuan cursed in his heart. Even with his current mental fortitude, he couldn't help but feel a little nauseous. After a while, a blood-red palanquin came flying through the air. Sitting on the shaft of the palanquin was a handsome youth. But he had a pair of inverted triangular eyes, which not only ruined his beauty, but also added a sense of ruthlessness. He didn't look like a good person. He was dressed in a blood-red robe, and his taste was comparable to that of Red Cloud Taoist. But Red Cloud was originally Red Cloud, and the robe he wore was also transformed by his transcendence energy, so the color was not really chosen. But for normal people, other than for marriage, rarely would they dress so brightly. Especially in this feudal era where there were cultivators, although there were many styles of clothing, but most of them were black, white and gray. The fancier ones were just embellished with decorative patterns, or choose green or blue fabrics. The Church of the Divine Blood actually failed to kill someone. What a bunch of trash. The red-robed youth glanced in the direction where Lei Fan had disappeared, and his eyes flashed with dissatisfaction. As for who he was targeting, it was obvious. This was the patriarch of the Church of the Divine Blood lamenting that his disciples and grand-disciples had failed to live up to his expectations. Although the Church of the Divine Blood had been completely wiped out by the Northern Battlefront Army, and now Yang Qinglin was all alone. Shen Lin Jun, defend against the enemy. Following closely behind, Lei Qiusheng's voice rang out. Teams of red-feathered and white-caped soldiers from the Jin family chopped down the hungry ghosts that were pouncing towards them, and the team behind each of them carried 7 short spears. After the comrades in the front chopped down the hungry ghosts, they followed behind expressionlessly, and nailed the hungry ghosts on the ground with their spears, restraining their spasming and healing bodies. They had good teamwork, and were very skilled in dealing with the undying. The survivors couldn't compare to them, and they didn't even frown when they saw a bloody scene. The division of labor was clear, and everyone was focused on their own mission. Chapter 887. Before going to the battlefield, most of the soldiers were thinking about making a name for themselves in order to obtain the title of a noble or a general. However, after going to the battlefield, there were not many people who could still maintain this kind of thinking. Most people were thinking about how to survive. To put it bluntly, the ancient battlefield was like a meat grinder. Every soldier fought face to face. Unless they were really brave to a certain extent, after a few battles, even if they did not die, they would become disabled. Otherwise, they would be like the famous generals that Lin Yuan had seen in his previous life. All of them had hidden injuries and old illnesses. Even if they did not die on the battlefield, they would not end up dying of old age. If one wanted to survive on the battlefield with cold weapons, it was a skill. Even if one pretended to be dead, one had to choose a place where there were not many corpses and no one would pass by. After the war, when the victors cleaned up the battlefield, they had to find a way to slip away so that they would not be killed or captured and punished according to military law. Therefore, the more inconspicuous a person was, the easier it was to survive. Golden armor, red plume, and a white cloak. This kind of outfit was a little too conspicuous on the battlefield. It was estimated that it would not be long before the fierce people of the enemy came over with their weapons. Otherwise, when the enemy's long-range troops attacked, they would focus on taking care of the conspicuous targets. Therefore, if one did not die early on the battlefield dressed in gaudy clothes, then he or she was a fierce person. In history, how many of those fierce generals who were known as the enemies of 10,000 people actually wore standard equipment? Other than them, there were definitely people who did not wear standard equipment. As for why they did not leave their names, was that still a problem? The gaudy equipment also proved that the members of Shenlin Jun were really fierce. After fighting in all kinds of wars, big and small, those who were dressed in gaudy clothes and had not been hacked to death. Even if they did not talk about their cultivation, in the history of Lin Yuan's previous life, they were basically fierce generals who could fight against 10,000 people. However, in Shenlin Jun's army, they were only at the level of a small soldier. As the most elite army of Shenwu dynasty, no matter if it was the northern army or the southern expedition, they would not be a match for Shenlin Jun's army even if they fought together. It was no doubt normal that the various revolutionary armies in the south were destroyed by such an army. If it was not because of the chaos caused by the Sky Demon, Shenlin Jun would not have been able to defend the northern frontier even if he had the help of the Shuangjin dynasty. It was estimated that only the Blackwater Army and the Falling Star Army could compete with them. However, the former needed time to grow. After all, although the Blackwater Army had the advantage of being blessed by the heavens and the northern frontier's martial arts and resources, they had not been an army for long. For example, Zhao Guangchong, Qin Yu, and Bao Yuan had reached the Heaven Gang realm. However, almost everyone in Shenlin Jun's army was at the Heaven Gang realm. Although the latter's quality was about the same and they had been fighting for a long time, there were still too few of them. From this, it could be seen that although Lei Qiusheng spent most of his taxes on Shenlin Jun every year, it was not without reason that the Shenwu dynasty could steal the country and establish itself as one of the 7 dynasties. Lei Qiusheng, who was also wearing a golden armor, stood at the back of Shenlin Jun. The only difference was that the white cloak on his back was drawn with patterns of human faces and beast heads with golden threads. Basically, military experts had a hobby of collecting. Some fierce people had a lot of military flags placed in their military meeting room. These flags were obtained after defeating other famous generals and were used to show off their military achievements. It could be considered the romance of soldiers and was also the favorite way for soldiers to show off in this era. Of course, not everyone's military flag was qualified to be collected. Those unknown Tom, Dick, and Harry did not have the qualifications to be collected by Lei Qiusheng, who had the label of military god plastered on his forehead. In the eyes of Lei Qiusheng, this kind of flag would most likely be chopped down to avoid being an eyesore. Lei Qiusheng's cloak was something similar. The human faces embroidered on it were the faces of generals and demonic beasts that he had defeated one by one. A single cloak could be embroidered with 15 to 40 patterns. Before Lei Qiusheng left the imperial capital, there were nearly 1,000 similar cloaks. One could imagine how glorious this man's military achievements were. His Majesty really gave me a surprise. Lin Yuan glanced at Lei Qiusheng and the corner of his mouth slightly twitched. When a man was about to die, his words were kind. The words that Lei Qiusheng said before his death did not seem to be entirely to sow discord between Lin Yuan and Lei Qiusheng. He had such an army in his hands, yet he did not take it out even when he had almost died. When the sky demon attacked the northern frontier, he did not take it out either. He only said that he would deliver this fatal blow at the right time. Now that Shenlin Jun had appeared here at this time, it was indeed very fatal. At least, it was so for Lin Yuan. He did not think that he could only escape from Shenlin Jun's pursuit. Lei Qiusheng did not seem to understand the coldness in Lin Yuan's words. He smiled and said, "Soldiers are double-edged swords. They can kill the enemy and also protect the country. Using these little bastards to fight the sky demon head-on is like using an egg to crack a rock. But if you let them hide, at the crucial moment, didn't they save your life? Even if the method is a bit dirty, it is still a life-saving grace." When Shenlin Jun was hiding in the northern frontier, Lin Yuan had never seen the reports of the major intelligence agencies. Whether they had hidden in the northern frontier before the northern frontier became chaotic or after the northern frontier was transformed into the underworld, it could not be denied that this army was a ticking time bomb in Lin Yuan's eyes. He did not know when they would swing their blades and aim at the vital points of the northern frontier. Especially at this critical moment, it was said that the battle in the front line was very tragic. Almost half of the Blackwater army was lost, and the Falling Star army was almost wiped out. Not to mention the cannon fodder southern expedition. The Northern Army was also on the verge of collapse under the scourge of the Northern Restoration Society and the Immortal. The military power of the northern frontier was declining rapidly. It was hard to control the existence of Shenlin Jun. A man with a strong desire for power, who was in charge of the most powerful army in the whole territory, Lin Yuan never knew what was called luck. Whether it was in his previous life or this life, the reason why he could survive was that he was used to having the most malicious speculations about others. Although it was tiring to live, it was proven that this habit had saved him from death more than once in his previous life. "Let's go." Lei Qiusheng glanced at Lin Yuan and said with a fake smile, "The Shenwu dynasty is not officially destroyed yet. The northern frontier is still my territory. No matter what has turned the northern frontier into this, if it is not stopped, it will not be just the northern frontier that will become like this, right? Your Blackwater Dragon King Temple can resist the enemy, which means you can find the enemy and kill it. Based on this, I will not do anything to you." Lei Qiusheng pointed at his head and added, "I'm not so muddle-headed that I can't think straight." Chapter 888. Wine Sword Mysterious, who had turned into Shura, opened his mouth, but no one could hear what he said clearly. They saw a flash of red light, and Wine Sword Mysterious had already rushed to the temple attendant with his sword. The sword was pointed at Lin Yuan. There was no emotion in his eyes that were full of hostility. The only emotion that could be read was the desire for battle and blood. Obviously, he had completely forgotten Lin Yuan. Clang! The sound of metal colliding rang out. The sword in Wine Sword Mysterious' hand was raised high by the shock, but a cyan black machete was only slightly deviated. With the slight adjustment of the wrist of the attacker, the machete returned to the original track and still slashed at Wine Sword Mysterious' chest. Chi! The machete tore open Wine Sword Mysterious' gradually solidified chest, and a large amount of black blood gushed out. However, in just a moment, the powerful recovery ability of the Immortal and Shura began to work. The wound torn by the machete slowly grew granulation. The granulation squirmed and entangled together, and the torn wound was almost healed in an instant. Tisk! Yang Qinglin curled his lips, shook off the black blood on the machete, and said expressionlessly, "Undying monster, the healing speed is better than the ordinary immortal. Except that I can't see his wisdom for the time being, he is much stronger than the garbage around. He deserves to be the strongest sword practitioner of the royal family of 10,000 swords in the past. He is really tricky. His wisdom is not high, at least for the time being. In the face of an invincible opponent, he chose to launch a sneak attack. After failing, he quickly realized that it was difficult for him to get away, so he turned to rely on his immortal characteristic to prepare for battle. His attack was aimed at me. It was not aimed at me, but he subconsciously judged that I was the weakest among the opponents around him. He killed the weak and then turned to deal with the strong. Although this tactic does not work most of the time, it can prove that this guy's wisdom has reached the level of the top predator of beasts. There was no change on Lin Yuan's head of the flood dragon, as if it was not him who was targeted by Wine's sword Mysterious just now. The level of the top predator of beasts, Lei Qiusheng narrowed his eyes slightly and said in a deep voice, in other words, it has the level of an 8 to 10-year-old human child. While it is crazy, it still has a trace of rationality. Then, this kind of guy, is there a possibility that it can be domesticated? Shuras can't be tamed. The existence of this race only pursues to kill powerful opponents, or be killed by powerful opponents, and then constantly recovers and regenerates. Through one death battle after another, they quickly become stronger. Not to mention that their intelligence is not high now, even if they have the intelligence of an adult, they are 100% arrogant and unruly. With such a guy by your side, you may not be able to order him around. Who knows, he might even become a knife hanging over your head. Lin Yuan squinted his eyes and looked at Zhou Jianxian, who had a violent look in his eyes. He opened his mouth and interrupted Lei Qiusheng's delusional thoughts. Innate Shuras would not obey anyone except the existence that created them, such as ancestor Mingi who created the Azura tribe, or the evil god who prompted Zhou Jianxian to transform into Shuras. However, it was hard to say. After all, after the death of the warlike and war devourer, there was a high probability that they would transform into Shuras and enter the path of Shuras. Lin Yuan did not know Zhou Jianxian, so he was not sure whether he transformed into Shuras himself after he died in the forest of hungry ghosts, or whether he was used by the evil god as the key to open the path of Shuras and transformed into this with a secret skill. If he transformed himself, there was a possibility of subduing him. Although he still changed his nature as a vicious wolf, as long as he could always maintain a stronger posture than him, he could only be a domestic dog with his tail between his legs in front of his master. But if it was the latter, Lin Yuan, who had half a foot in the realm of the underworld god, knew very well that once the immortal was formed, it would be a tragedy. It would be neither alive nor dead and would never enter the cycle of reincarnation. It would either wander in the human world or the underworld forever, or it would be destroyed in body and soul by the things that targeted the immortal. Unless the underworld was established in this world, and there were positions such as the 10 kings of hell, judges, impermanence, and so on, the immortal would never be able to cultivate to a positive result. When the group of people was confronting Zhou Jianxian, the weather suddenly changed. Although the gray death aura was still there, the sky suddenly became better. The warm sunlight shone through the gaps in the forest of hungry ghosts, making the hungry ghosts who were eyeing them covetously let out unpleasant strange cries. I can't be so unlucky, Lin Yuan's eyes flickered, and he whispered. Although he was not an immortal, he was still a quasi-underworld king. He could not understand the meaning of the strange cries of the hungry ghosts, but he could clearly feel the emotions in the cries of the hungry ghosts. That was fear. It wasn't because they were afraid of the sunlight. According to the information recorded in the scripture of all beings, the undying didn't fear sunlight no matter which world they were in. They preferred to appear at night simply because the majority of the undying cultivated by absorbing the essence of the moon. Just like how cultivators preferred to go to places with dense spirit energy, the undying didn't like to appear during the day because they couldn't absorb the essence of the moon during the day. Without replenishment, they would only grow weaker and weaker. Ultraviolet light could illuminate the undying. However, there were also immortal that could absorb sunlight to cultivate. It was just a difference in the amount. For example, among the immortal that could still be active under the sun, for example, after the Walking Dead evolved into zombies, if they existed for a long time, they would become flying zombies, which were not rare in myths. They were also called flying yikshas. Zombies of this level could absorb sunlight to strengthen themselves. Moreover, flying yikshaws were also a powerful troop class in the underworld in Lin Yuan's previous life. But flying zombies were not enough to cause a change in the sky. There were many immortal that could cause a change in the sky, but the most famous one was Drought Demon. During the war between the Yellow Emperor and Chiyu had invited the help of the Wind Master and the Rain Master to set up the desolate wind and bitter rain formation. Even Yinglong, the valiant general under the Yellow Emperor, suffered a great loss. One must know that Yinglong was a superior species in the dragon race, but he was suppressed in the method of summoning clouds and rain. One could imagine how critical the Yellow Emperor's situation was at that time. Without any other choice, the Yellow Emperor killed his daughter named Ba and used a secret method to refine her into a zombie. With a large amount of heavenly materials and earthly treasures, he refined her into the world's first zombie, which was also the highest level of existence among zombies. After Ba became a zombie, she gained a powerful ability, which was the legendary, once Drought Demon was born, the land within 1,000 li of scarlet. This sentence had an exaggerated meaning. With Lin Yuan's current vision, it was not difficult to guess that Drought Demon's true ability was to disperse the clouds. That was why the land within 1,000 li of scarlet was said. Chapter 889. The Drought Demon could disperse the clouds. Every time it appeared, it would be a clear sky. Both the white clouds and the rain clouds would avoid it. As long as the Drought Demon stayed in a place for a day, it would not rain for a day. After all, rain came from the dark clouds. If there were no clouds, how could it rain? According to the records in the myths, after that battle, Yinglong returned to the south, and Hanbo was exiled to the north. He was known as the god of drought. However, the people in the north always used sunbathing, flooding, eating tigers, and other such rituals to expel Hanba. It was not necessarily disrespectful to the god. It was just that in the ancient times of the previous world, there was no place that could withstand drought. Once there was a great drought, it basically represented the end of a dynasty. In the early days, people still treated Hitorigami as a god. However, after the middle of the Ming dynasty, Hitorigami was seen as a demon. There were even legends of Hitorigami turning into a hoe. Lin Yuan was not sure if it was true, but according to the information in the Book of Life, Ho did exist. Moreover, it was the nemesis of dragons. In the same realm, it was said that a Ho could fight 3 dragons and 2 flood dragons. Run! Lin Yuan cleared up the distracting thoughts in his mind and looked at the gradually receding clouds, which were getting bigger, and suddenly growled. Hitorigami, as the ancestor of zombies in the orthodox legends, was definitely not as common as it was in the novels of his previous life. Moreover, the northern frontier had not completely turned into the underworld. It was already extremely difficult to breed creatures like hungry ghosts and asuras. Most places should be overrun with zombies, but there was one thing that was absolutely impossible. This level of underworld could not breed a demon like Hitorigami. This guy was the foreign evil god. This was 2F** King Fun. Lin Yuan could face the prehistoric creatures with a high attitude because of the existence of karma on him. Those who only wanted to live did not have the guts to anger the heavens. At most, they would fight openly and secretly, forcing Lin Yuan to cooperate with them. They would never dare to take Lin Yuan's life. But what was Hitorigami? It was the ancestor of zombies. Zombies did not exist in the 3 realms, nor in the 5 elements. Mere karma could not bind them. To be honest, even if a demon of the zombies was formed, the heavens might not send down a heavenly tribulation. Even the god of thunder did not have the authority to send down lightning punishment on an existence that he could not control. If that thing wanted the position of Sky Marshal Underworld King, it would have to be favored by the world's will. But that was obviously impossible. Even if the world's will could not deal with it, it would not have any good feelings about it. Hitorigami was just a tool for the world's will to transform the northern frontier. Hitorigami should know this. Therefore, the hatred between the 2 sides would never end until one of them was dead. Unless, Lin Yuan's will, Hitorigami. When Hitorigami was born during the Yellow Emperor's time, it could fight against Fengbue and Yushi. This meant that Hitorigami had at least reached the threshold of a true god. Even in this world with an upper limit, the power it could unleash was definitely at the upper limit. It was not an existence that Lin Yuan could contend against. If he could not escape, Lin Yuan would have to give up on this clone and return his consciousness to his main body. Then, he would have to lower his head to the prehistoric creatures that did not put in any effort and discuss the matter of cooperation again. This could not be helped. If he lost some face, then so be it. It was better than losing his life. Guardians of the Elysium? They might not know how to deal with a demon of Hitorigami's level. Even if they knew, they would not risk their lives for Lin Yuan. In a short period of time, they would not be able to gather 1,000,000 merit points to invite other hosts to descend. The temple attendant, who was connected with Lin Yuan, did not hesitate at all. He turned around and fled in the direction he came from. Those survivors who survived because of Shen Lin Jun were not stunned. After all, they could survive in this doomsday place until now. If they could not bear it, they would have been killed by the immortals or had a complete mental breakdown. They did not believe in Shen Lin Jun who suddenly appeared. In contrast, they believed more in Lin Yuan who could protect some areas in the northern frontier with the Blackwater Dragon King Temple, and the temple attendant who did not give up on them easily and was willing to take the risk to cross the Hungry Ghost Forest with them. So when the temple attendants started to move, the survivors started to move as well, following behind the temple attendant and running madly without stopping. Yang Qinglin, who was holding a scimitar and confronting Zhou Jianxian, twitched his eyes slightly. He saw Zhou Jianchuan's figure move, turning around and rushing into the depths of the Hungry Ghost Forest. Almost at the same time, Yang Qinglin also hid his scimitar in his bloody robe, and rushed in the direction of the temple attendant. As an ancient cultivator, Yang Qinglin had been recovering his strength in the former territory of the Blood Divine sect. As a lucky withdrawal from the ancient stage where cultivators were killing each other, and came to the new era where at most mortals and low-level cultivators were fighting, he had not been accustomed to a dull life. His sensitivity to danger was far more sensitive than Lei Qiusheng. The intuition of a beast? Lei Qiusheng had a thoughtful look on his face, but his movements were not slow at all. He gently waved his hand and roared, "Everyone, get ready to escape with the survivors. Leave some people behind to stall for time. Everyone else, set off quickly and run until you can't run anymore." Before these people ran far, a scarlet figure rushed over like a ghost. After landing, the blood shadow dissipated, revealing its original appearance. It was also pale and bloodless, and its specific facial features could not be seen clearly. A head of long hair like withered grass covered its entire face. After landing, it had been bending over, walking with only one foot, and dragging the other foot on the ground. Ah! It seemed that after landing, it did not see the people it wanted to see, so it raised its head and made a sharp roar. Its eyes hidden under the messy hair turned, and it saw a group of Shen Lin Jun who were nailing the hungry ghosts to the ground. Although it was still walking with only one foot, its figure was as fast as the wind, and it was almost invisible. Every time it appeared, a Shen Lin Jun's corpse would fall to the ground. A trace of blood-red mist overflowed from the pores of the corpses and blended into the green robe. The corpses on the ground also became black and shriveled, and the death was extremely miserable. However, the death of their comrades did not seem to affect the remaining Shen Lin Jun soldiers at all. They could not see the green robe figure, so they simply ignored it. They mechanically cut down the hungry ghosts that rushed over and nailed them to the ground. That Black Jiao. Where is that? It seemed that it had not spoken for a long time. The green robe figure appeared again in front of a Shen Lin Jun soldier, and its voice was as harsh as a cat's paw scratching on the glass. Chapter 890. The Divine Forest Guard did not seem to be able to hear it at all, but it was still shocked by the ear-piercing sound that was so close that it frowned. Its right hand moved extremely quickly, and in an instant, it pulled out a saber from its waist and stabbed towards the abdomen of the green-clothed figure. The Shen Lin Jun warrior not only had a high cultivation, but also was good at using various weapons. With a high cultivation and a strong body, they were far better at using some weapons than those masters who had inherited martial arts but had no chance to cultivate. The knife was very fast and the knife light was very bright, but it was useless. The sharp waist knife stopped abruptly at the moment when it stabbed the lower abdomen of the figure in green. As the Shen Lin Jun warrior continued to exert force, there was a burst of zzz sound that made one's teeth ache. Immediately, it broke. The moment the iron piece fell to the ground, the figure in green had already raised his hand and lifted the weak human who attacked him with one hand. He opened his mouth again and said, "Answer me." "I won't die." In just a short while, several Shen Lin Jun warriors who were close to this side also picked up their weapons and attacked it. Clang! 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 As the sounds of metal colliding rang out, the weapons broke apart without a doubt, turning into metal shards that fell to the ground. Bah, monster! The Shen Lin Jun warrior who was lifted up by the figure in green still looked indifferent. He even struggled to spit and scolded angrily. The strange thing was that the figure in green didn't get angry when it was attacked by so many weapons. It even had the mood to threaten them. However, after hearing the word monster, it let out a mournful cry again. Immediately, its whole body was covered with blood. Its speed became more and more ghostly. The hundreds of Shen Lin Jun warriors who were left here to guard the rear were turned into charred corpses on the ground in less than 3 breaths. It killed Tiangang like killing dogs. It was terrifying. On the other side, Lei Qiusheng and Yang Qinglin quickly caught up with Miao Zhu. After all, both of them were in the Kongming realm. They were at least several times faster than Miao Zhu who was in the Tiangang realm. You seem to know these monsters very well. Yang Qinglin's emotionless eyes fell on Lin Yuan, and he opened his mouth to ask. The thing that the wine sword mysterious transformed into should be called Shura, which is a kind of undying. Only those who loved to fight when they were alive would have the chance to become Shura who was obsessed with fighting after they died. Looking at the way he avoided the thing that came after, it means that he turned into Shura on his own. I'm not sure what the thing that followed me was, but if I'm not mistaken, it should be a monster called Hitorigami. It's also the mastermind behind the northern frontier's current state. When I first came back, I wanted to find it, kill it, and restore the northern frontier to its former state. But now, I've given up. If that thing is really a drought demon, with my strength, even if I'm at my peak, and with the help of void realm existences like you, I can only last 3 moves at most. Speaking of this, Lin Yuan grinned, revealing a rather ugly smile. The meaning of these 3 moves is that it only needs 1 move each to kill the 3 of us. In other words, if we join forces to confront it, it is estimated that we can take 1 more breath. Hearing this, Yang Qinglin and Lei Qiusheng's expressions had subtle changes. Yang Qinglin was a cultivator in the ancient times. At that time, the cultivation world and the mortal world had not been completely separated. Although the cultivation of the void realm was not considered a powerhouse, at least it was out of the category of cannon fodder. Lei Qiusheng was a serious new generation cultivator. The void realm was already a high existence. What kind of existence could kill the void realm experts like killing dogs, 1 move each? It's the transcendent realm. Yang Qinglin's face was ugly as if he had eaten a fly. To be able to make a weather-beaten ancient cultivator show such an ugly expression, one could imagine how complicated Yang Qinglin's psychological activities were at this moment. At least, it's the transcendent realm. Lin Yuan took a deep breath and said with a strange look in his eyes, it's not appropriate to simply describe it in terms of realm. To put it simply, its power is already at the limit of this world. If it's slightly stronger, it will cause the space to vibrate. If it keeps attacking with full force, it will even cause the space in a certain area to collapse, burying all the existences in it. In other words, such a thing can't be killed unless you want to die together with it. Hiss. Lei Qiusheng took a deep breath. Although he didn't know what the transcendent realm was, he understood the words such as space vibrations and space collapses. Lei Qiusheng's voice was even a little distorted. He growled, aren't you able to contend with it? Aren't those black water dragon king temples able to resist the land changes and even make the undead deter? If the opponent's strength is as terrifying as you said, then If you don't believe me, you can stay here and fight with it. It can also buy us an extra breath of time to escape. Lin Yuan's face changed, but he just restrained his smile. From the corner of his eyes, a figure wrapped in blood aura had already appeared. It was approaching this fleeing team at a very fast speed. They were being chased by someone, and the opponent's speed was even faster. If it weren't for the fact that the fleeing team was quite long, and the opponent seemed to enjoy this game of cat and mouse, slowly following behind the team and devouring the blood aura of those who couldn't run, they would have been caught up by that guy. After seeing the opponent's appearance and the blood aura wrapped around its body, Lin Yuan was more and more certain that that thing was Hitorigami. At this juncture, it was difficult for Lin Yuan to explain to Lei Qiusheng at length. The Blackwater Dragon King Temple could protect one side entirely because of the incense power accumulated in the temple for so long. It would take some time for the underworld aura to erode the area protected by the incense power. In addition, he was also a half-step king of hell. Those undead were not under his command. Of course, they would avoid places where his aura existed. It was just a coincidence, but this didn't mean that his strength was comparable to Hitorigami's. Almost without hesitation, Lin Yuan loosened his body that was wrapped around the temple attendant's arm. He threw himself directly onto Lei Qiusheng's shoulder, then tightly wrapped around Lei Qiusheng's shoulder. He growled, "That thing is catching up. There's no time to talk nonsense. Run." On the other hand, the temple attendant and the guards created by the system slowed down their footsteps at the same time, ignoring the frantically fleeing team. Their eyes were fixed on the blood-red figure that was constantly approaching, and beads of sweat the size of soybeans appeared on their foreheads. Lei Qiusheng held back the curse that was about to come out of his mouth, and the speed of running forward with Lin Yuan increased a lot again, but behind him, the momentum of those Heavenly Dipper realm cultivators had completely returned to nothingness. More than 200 Heavenly Dipper realm cultivators added together could only delay it for 2 breaths of time. Chapter 891. Monster. That's ridiculous. Lei Qiusheng's expression began to distort. As a Kongming realm existence, he naturally didn't put more than 200 Heaven Dipper realm cultivators in his eyes. Although he wasn't sure if these 200 people could defeat him, he was certain that if he wanted to leave, these 200 people definitely wouldn't be able to stop him. But the problem was that the monster behind them wasn't even a question of whether they could stop him or not. In 2 breaths of time, he killed more than 200 Heaven Dipper realm cultivators. This battle record was too ridiculous. In comparison, they were like clay chickens and pottery dogs. Shen Lin Jun, meet the enemy. Lei Qiusheng took a deep breath, waved his hand, and coldly gave the order. He had completely believed Lin Yuan's words, but now that they had encountered such a terrifying thing, Lin Yuan was only running. He knew that he couldn't outrun the other party, but as long as he could continue to run, the outcome of the matter would change. When you're helpless, you have to believe in someone with a mind of their own. This was Lei Qiusheng's experience after many years in the army. When he was on the battlefield, he had encountered more than one desperate situation. Defeat, mutiny, hunger, plague. Although it was different from the current situation, the only difference was that once they failed, the result was death. No matter how calm a person was, when they encountered an unexpected situation, they might be out of their wits. When other victims put forward their opinions, don't refute or argue. Just think about whether there was a way to survive. If there was, do as the other party said, and you might be able to survive. From a small soldier to a military god, Lei Qiusheng had faced countless difficulties. Those who did nothing and waited for the heavens to pity them or bicker did indeed die. Those who survived were either lucky or found a way to survive and didn't give up on them. But, as long as they ran, would they be able to survive? Lei Qiusheng's eyes flashed with a touch of contemplation. He didn't know where the thing called Drought Demon came from, and the Black Jiao didn't have the intention to explain. However, what was certain was that the other party's strength was far above theirs. If it wasn't for the fact that the other party was toying with them, it would only take a blink of an eye for them to catch up and kill them. Looking at the entire northern frontier, no one could deny that this force, which was separated from the Shinwu dynasty, was growing at an astonishing speed. Especially now, when the dynasty was unstable, the northern frontier almost unilaterally announced that they were the new 7th dynasty. However, no matter how astonishing their growth was, it was impossible for them to catch up to the foundations of the various empires so quickly. As a result, no one in the northern frontier could contend against Hanba. Existences like the Guardians of the Heaven's Gate might have the ability to contend against Hanba, but it was impossible for them to perish together with Hanba. This situation seemed to be unsolvable. As Lei Qiusheng's last trump card, the remaining Shenlin Jun soldiers still showed amazing loyalty at this moment. Almost as soon as Lei Qiusheng's voice faded away, Shenlin Jun's soldiers had already pulled out their weapons, roaring and facing the monster that they knew was impossible to defeat. "Go on, run." Lin Yuan's voice sounded again. He was ready to give up this outer body incarnation and return to the Endless Sea, because things had gone far beyond his initial expectations. The existence of Hanba was not something that he could contend with now. Buzz, a clear sound exploded. The blood-red voice paused slightly after this clear cry, revealing a green-clothed figure. However, the long, weed-like hair was blown up by the strong wind, revealing a pale, yet beautiful face. The only thing that destroyed the beauty was the pair of white, murky eyes without pupils. They were like fish eyes, and when placed on a face that resembled a human's, it emitted a strange aura that made one's heart palpitate. Even though Lin Yuan was already mentally prepared, he still felt a strong impact. Hanba from the Untainted World, female, wearing green clothes, she was most likely the unlucky daughter of the Yellow Emperor, who was killed by her respected father and refined into a zombie. Even though she made great contributions to the Yellow Emperor after her death, she did not receive the treatment that a hero should receive. Instead, she was exiled to the north by the Yellow Emperor and became the god of drought or a walking drought in the eyes of humans. No matter where she went, she would be beaten, scolded, driven away, and even demonized in human history. Now, Hanba had truly become one of the demons. The untainted world was so vast, there might not be only one Hanba. Lin Yuan once had a similar delusion. However, reality gave him a resounding slap in the face. Just like humans and demonic beasts, even if they were in the same realm, there was an absolute difference in strength and weakness. Among the existences of Hanba, which one would be more difficult to deal with than the daughter of the Yellow Emperor, the world's first zombie? Reinforcements? Demonic beasts? Lei Qiusheng looked at the figure standing in the air and swallowed dryly, his face a little pale. It was a huge fish that was close to 1,000 feet long, with fins that looked like wings on its body. No, it could be said that those were wings. Not a demonic beast, but a strange beast. Lin Yuan also stared at the figure that swept out from the Hengduan Mountains, a hint of surprise flashed in his heterochromatic eyes. Although he had long been mentally prepared to see a creature of the untainted world, Lin Yuan did not expect that the first strange beast he encountered would be a luo fish. It was a strange beast that lived in the source of Meng water. It had the body of a fish and the wings of a bird. Its voice was like a mandarin duck, and it also had the bloodline of the dragon race in its body. Like Hanba, it was an existence that gradually turned into a demon. In the oldest legends, the luo fish was actually an auspicious beast. Wherever they appeared, it meant that there would be a flood, causing people to seek refuge in advance. And as time passed, the luo fish gradually became a disaster beast that would bring floods. In his previous life, there was a saying, a fish that leaps over the dragon gate becomes a dragon, and only a carp can be a dragon. This carp was actually not a carp, but a strange beast like the luo fish that had the bloodline of the dragon race. Just like the interpretation of those fairy tales, the ugly duckling could become a white swan because its parents were white swans. A carp without the bloodline of the dragon race would still be a carp even if it leaped over the dragon gate thousands of times. However, the luo fish in the myths had the bloodline of the dragon race. According to some historical records, the Luo fish could transform into a dragon after cultivating for 500 years, although it would only transform into a flood dragon. During the flood control period, Yu the Great had killed the flood dragon that caused the flood. It was most likely a Luo fish that had cultivated to a certain level. In any case, during that period, all kinds of strange beasts were either dead or hidden. What's more, when the ancestral dragon was sealed, the first Kirin had no choice but to become an auspicious symbol to save its life. Chapter 892. The dragons of the four seas would not cause floods on the continent. Even the evil dragons would only cause chaos in the coastal areas or sink ships at sea. The dragons led by the ancestral dragon and other experts could only retreat to the four seas. Their descendants would not be so blind as to go against the victors of the previous catastrophes. The Luo fish in front of him did not look like it had cultivated for merely 500 years, regardless of its size or realm. Lin Yuan could sense the dragon bloodline in it, but it was not strong. Obviously, this Luo fish was also a proud master. Like Kirin, it was unwilling to follow the method of evolution recorded in its bloodline. Instead, it was determined to walk its own path. The only difference was that Kirin might still be hitting a wall, but this Luo fish had already succeeded. Apart from the dragon bloodline in its body, this Luo fish was definitely an existence that could kill a real dragon. It did not need to evolve into a flood dragon like other members of its race and slowly evolve into a superior species. You want to stop me? Hanba looked at the Luo fish that had appeared out of nowhere. Her beautiful face gradually became ferocious. The Luo fish also let out a voice that sounded like the chirping of mandarin ducks. If you kill him, you will ruin our plans. Then you have to die too. As if it had spoken more and more, Hanba's voice started to become smoother. There was even some correction in its tone. It was no longer full of resentment and hostility like before. Both the Luo fish and Hanba were existences that wanted to do great things. However, the Luo fish's great things were related to Lin Yuan by karma. In this battle where they had no choice, they stood on the war chariot of the heavenly axiom to ensure that they would not be punished after the heavenly axiom won. As for whether the victor would be Hong Jun, that was not a problem for them to consider. From the moment they tried to escape from the Eldritch world, they could no longer board Hong Jun's ship. As for Hanba, karma could not do anything to it. Compared to being a dog of the heavenly Daos, it wanted to replace Lin Yuan's position and become the future Nether King of the Heaven Martial World. She didn't have this opportunity in the past. After all, it wasn't easy to complete a world. There had to be enough accumulation, and there were certain requirements for the number of living beings and the degree of civilization. Now that she finally had the opportunity, the position of the Netherworld King had been decided. How could she accept this? Hidorigami's body was once again enveloped by the blood chi. His stooped figure wrapped in green clothes was slowly concealed. However, the instant the blood chi flourished, Hidorigami's speed suddenly stabilized. He transformed into a blood shadow and swept through the air, directly crashing into Luo Yu, who was cutting in horizontally. Luo Yu did not dodge or evade. Its body gradually suffused an azure glow. When the two balls of light, one red and one blue, collided, Luo Yu spread its wings and flew more than 30 meters high. Hidorigami flew backward and landed on the ground. The blood chi that enveloped his body became slightly thinner. Suppressed? Lei Qiusheng's expression lit up as he exclaimed in surprise. Yang Qinglin, who had also stopped to watch the battle, shook his head and said in a low voice, "That strange beast suffered a loss." Although Hidorigami was knocked back by the recoil, he was not injured. On the other hand, that strange beast had a 3-meter-long wound on its left side. Although Luo Yu was more than 30 meters above the ground, a cultivator's eyesight was extraordinary. Previously, Lei Qiusheng's attention was completely focused on Hidorigami. He did not pay much attention to Luo Yu. Now that Yang Qinglin reminded him, he quickly found the 3-meter-long wound on Luo Yu's body. If this strange beast is not a match, should we run again? Lei Qiusheng's expression changed slightly as he swallowed a mouthful of saliva with some difficulty. He knew very well that he could not outrun Hidorigami. Previously, he had forced himself to run forward completely because he believed in Lin Yuan. But now, this powerful aide had only exchanged one blow with Hidorigami and was wounded. No matter how he looked at it, he did not seem like an existence that could defeat Hidorigami. It hasn't started yet. Lin Yuan wrapped around Lei Qiusheng's shoulder, his eyes shining as he looked in the direction of the Wei River. Hidorigami could drive the clouds and the sun, but as a zombie, its strength was still its physique. In a head-on clash with Luoyu, Hidorigami would definitely not be the one at a disadvantage. However, Luoyu was different. As one of the strange beasts of the classic of mountains and seas, and a legendary calamity beast that could summon floods, it was a classic sorcerer model. Hidorigami had just made the first move. For Luoyu, the battle had not yet begun. Rumble, rumble, it was as if a great army was galloping, as if the earth was trembling and the mountains were roaring. The power of nature was about to appear. There was no great army here. Most of the undying around them were walking corpses. Not to mention that they instinctively fled out of fear of Hidorigami and Luoyu's auras. Even if they surrounded them, they would not be able to escape with the momentum of a great army. However, although the earth was trembling, there were no signs of cracks in the ground. It was clearly not an earthquake. Water. Flood. One of the survivors was curious about the sound behind him and turned around to take a look. He immediately exclaimed out loud and increased his running speed by a few notches. The flood of unknown origin was like a beast that devoured everything. Everything it touched along the way was uprooted and carried in the water as it continued to surge towards them. With just a cursory glance, one could see all kinds of trees, stones, and even the wreckage of buildings. There were even some undying that had been swept into the water and were struggling. These days, natural and man-made disasters were common occurrences. Anyone who had experienced a flood would know that the rolling water was extremely oppressive. If one was unlucky enough to be hit by a wave, even a strong and healthy martial artist could be directly killed. Even if they didn't die, they would still be unconscious and fall into the water. They would either be crushed to death, drowned to death, or washed to an unknown corner. In any case, the probability of survival was so low that it made one's hair stand on end. This was the undying characteristic of the undying. Although their bodies were crushed and poured into their mouths and noses time and time again, they could constantly self-heal and expel the water that had become muddy because of the large amount of soil. But even if they did not die, it did not mean that they had the ability to escape from the surging water. Even the undying that had pushed the northern frontier to the brink of destruction was still ridiculously weak in the face of the power of nature. This water, where did it come from? Lei Qiusheng and Yang Qinglin's faces could not help but twitch. They turned their eyes to Lin Yuan at the same time. They felt that their worldview had been shattered again and again today. Now, even if a few powerhouses from ancient times appeared and revived, it would not make them change their expressions. Compared to Luoyu and Hidorigami, the revival of powerhouses was indeed not a big deal. After all, they were all ants. Even if they were a little stronger, they were still ants. Wei River. Lin Yuan looked indifferently at the surging water, obviously not surprised at all. Chapter 893. Ding. Congratulations to the host. Observing the ancient mystical beast Luo fish controlling water, water monarch proficiency +1. Ding. Congratulations to the host. Observing the ancient mystical beast Luo fish controlling water, water monarch proficiency +1. Ding. Congratulations to the host. Observing the ancient mystical beast Luo fish controlling water, water monarch proficiency +1. The system notifications kept appearing in his mind. Lin Yuan remained motionless as he stared at the Luo fish controlling the Wei River. He had done something similar before. When he first attacked Wei River City, he used the water dragon formed by the Wei River to break through the impregnable defense of Wei River City. Otherwise, Shenlin Jun would not be so easy to deal with even if he was just a reserve soldier. At least half of the 3,000 old soldiers of the Fallen Star Army would be killed before they could break into Wei River City. Even if they survived, they would be exhausted. At that time, it would be hard to say if they could still cause effective damage. However, this was not Wei River City built on the banks of the Wei River. This was the periphery of mountain-blocking city, a place close to the Hengduan mountain range. The northern frontier and almost all the territories in the north were separated from the Wei River. In fact, the Luo fish was congenitally at a disadvantage when facing Hanba, because Hanba had the ability to drive the clouds and drive the sun. No matter how strong the Luo fish was, it could not cook without rice. Without the existence of clouds, it could not call for rain. It could only transfer the surrounding water. However, the nearby area was full of mountains, and the nearest water area had to be found in Lin Yuan's nest. Moreover, it was only a big lake, which could be evaporated by Hanba's breath. Since ancient times, there were countless monster kings who were good at controlling water. No matter how fancy their methods were, there were only 3 methods in the end. They could either use the nearby water body to control the water flow, or use the clouds to summon rain and use a rainstorm to obtain sufficient water flow. If they were more ruthless, they would prepare some treasures that could store inanimate objects and store a large amount of water in advance. After all, they would not create water out of nothing. Unless the true god was so extravagant as to exchange the power of incense for water, Lin Yuan's current water control technique had only reached the stage where he could control the nearby water flow. If he were to stand here like the Luo fish and absorb the water for his own use, he would not be able to do it even if he sucked it dry. Even if he had the position of the northern frontier god and was the true dragon king of the northern frontier, he could not do it. He could not even Luo fish controlling the northern frontier. Hee hee. Hanba merely laughed coldly in disdain as he watched the rolling water. The blood aura around his body once again scattered. His originally stooped body actually slowly straightened up. His long hair fluttered, once again revealing his beautiful face. Even Lei Qiusheng and Yang Qinglin, who were well aware of Hanba's terror, were slightly startled. Their gazes were fixed on Hanba's face without blinking. After all, she was the daughter of the Yellow Emperor, an existence who had left her name in the legends. Even if she had become a zombie now, she was still a woman who once had the title of Heavenly Maiden. In terms of charm, even Guan Zhaoshan paled in comparison. However, Lei Qiusheng was the emperor of a country after all, and Yang Qinglin was an old monster who had lived for who knows how many years. He had probably seen countless goddesses and saintesses. Even if Hanba was indeed beautiful and moving, it was not enough to make the two of them lose their minds at the same time. Therefore, it could be confirmed that Hanba was using illusions, charms, and other tricks at this moment. Her goal was to make them fix their gazes on her. With a thought, the incense power on Lin Yuan's interface burned wildly, forming a divine barrier around him. He did not open his mouth to remind Lei Qiusheng and Yang Qinglin. After all, even if it was a small trick used by a being of Hanba's level, it could be said to be a supernatural power. Lin Yuan did not think that he could awaken the two of them with just a shout. He even felt somewhat lucky that he did not fall into the enchantment of that beautiful face immediately. Close your eyes. Luo Yu was still floating more than 10 feet in the air. When Hanba gradually straightened her body, he opened his mouth to growl. In an instant, the two men who had fallen into Hanba's charms were awakened. The oppression of a superior to a low-level cultivator also forced them to close their eyes involuntarily. In the next moment, a burst of strong light suddenly erupted from Hanba's body. Even though Lin Yuan had set up a divine barrier in advance, he was almost blinded by the light. "Tsk, I was too careless." Lin Yuan suddenly cursed under his breath. It was as if he had no eyes to begin with, his vision depended entirely on his senses and smell. Even the images he saw were images that had been processed by the eye of God. Pure strong light would not blind him. Because he was blind to begin with, but before Lin Yuan could regret wasting the power of incense, he suddenly saw that the power of incense on his panel had been stirred up again. It slid down nearly 200 points before it stopped. When he turned his head, he saw that Lei Qiusheng's face was flushed red. Some of his exposed skin still had traces of burns and blisters. His power of incense did not continue to decrease because after being burned, Lei Qiusheng had actively activated the Gang Qi in his body to resist the rising temperature around him. However, this was a temporary measure. Hanba's body erupted with intense light and heat. This was her natal supernatural power. It was given to her by the Yellow Emperor after he had cruelly killed his daughter to deal with the array of bleak wind and bitter rain. Ordinary cultivators could not withstand this thing. Even if they could, would they be able to fight Hanba in a battle of attrition? Fortunately, the water summoned by Luo Yu had arrived at this time. It coiled around Hanba like water dragons, causing the surrounding temperature to drop gradually. After all, at this time, Hanba was fully focused on dealing with Luo Yu's tricks. She had no time to deal with these small fries. However, these water dragons seemed to be able to temporarily trap Hanba. In front of her powerful supernatural power, even the Count of Wind and Lord of Rain of the past would be defeated if they worked together, let alone the water stream summoned by Luo Yu. You dare to stop me with these tricks? Hanba's voice rang out from the area surrounded by water dragons. Her tone was filled with insufferably arrogance, as if this Luo Yu was just a chicken or a pottery dog. Lin Yuan subconsciously wanted to release the Nether Realm's black water. After all, the northern frontier was different from the Endless Sea. He had accumulated a large amount of Nether Realm's black water here. Moreover, after the battle between the northern frontier and the Sky Demon, the Nether Realm's black water had swallowed a lot of the Sky Demon. Naturally, it had become even larger. If he released all of the Nether Realm's black water, it would not be difficult to form a nether river that was about 1,000 meters long. However, the moment he opened his mouth, before he could release the Nether Realm's black water, Lin Yuan closed his mouth again and obediently swallowed a mouthful of saliva. The cities in the northern frontier that were still under his control basically relied on the Nether Realm's black water and the Black Water Dragon King Temple to resist the corrosion of the Nether Realm's black water. Taking away a large amount of the Nether Realm's black water was equivalent to handing over the territory of the northern frontier to the Undying. This kind of transaction could not be done. If he did it once, the world's will that had been hiding in the dark would get what it wanted. Chapter 894. He had thought that the battle between Hitorigami and Luo Yu would be like the battle between a warrior and a sorcerer in a game from his previous life. Before the sorcerer finished chanting, the warrior would definitely have the upper hand. However, he did not expect that after Luo Yu finished chanting, Hitorigami would suddenly transform from a brawny warrior into a brawny demon warrior. How good would it be to have a background? There were many zombies in his previous life, especially during the Republic of China period. Zombies were rampant, but how many zombies were out of the realm of melee combat? Look at Hitorigami. She was a warrior when she released her blood and chi. She could cast spells when she retracted her blood and chi. She was a standard dual cultivator of magic and martial arts. If she had been placed in a Western fantasy novel in his previous life, she would have been the main character template. Moreover, she had an extremely powerful father. Although this father did not treat his daughter well, he had also given her the ability to be the nemesis of water. Why did Luo Yu attack? This thought popped into Lin Yuan's mind uncontrollably. Hitorigami was one of the existences that had escaped from the primordial world. Those primordial creatures might not know everything about her, but they definitely had some understanding of this woman who had left her name in the legends. It was impossible that they did not know that the Count of Wind and the Count of Rain had been defeated by her. At this time, they had sent Luo Yu, who was restrained by Hitorigami, to help. What kind of behavior was this? A standard actor. This was called gifting one's head. Luo Yu, who was flying high in the sky, took a deep breath and looked at the rising steam. He turned to look at Lin Yuan and the rest and growled angrily, "Why are you in a daze? Can't you see that I can't beat her? If we don't run now, we won't be able to escape when she escapes." Lin Yuan, Lei Qiusheng, Yang Qinglin, the two people and the flood dragon looked at each other, and they all showed a speechless expression. How could a noob be so self-righteous? If he couldn't beat her, why was he pretending? Good fellow, he had directly mobilized the water from the Wei River. That aura was like a whale swallowing thousands of miles. In the end, the water was just a means to control Hitorigami so that they could escape. If you had let out that fart earlier, we would have run far away by now. No one can leave. As if sensing that its prey was retreating, the drought demon that was trapped in the water suddenly let out a furious roar. Its hands that were covered in blood energy suddenly stretched out and directly pierced through the water dragon that was constantly rolling. With another push, it actually forcibly tore open a passage and strode out of the passage. It was only now that Lin Yuan noticed that Hanba did not seem to be faring too well either. Her originally bright red blood aura was now changing into a dark brown and viscous color. The glow that her body emitted had also become much weaker. After all, Luo Yu's techniques had been countered by her. The strength that both of them could display in this world was actually more or less the same. Of course, it was impossible for her to be completely unscathed. Especially when she had forcefully broken out of the encirclement, her exhaustion had become even more terrifying. TCH, you should know very well that even if I'm no match for you, you can't touch this black Jiao. We've waited bitterly in this world for so long, and now we've finally found hope. Do you really want to become enemies with all of us? Luo Yu flapped its wings and continued to circle in the sky. It stared coldly at Hanba but no longer attempted to attack. Hope? You're still dreaming of going back? Hanba looked at Luo Yu with a complicated expression and said loudly, is this black Jiao worthy of being called hope? Do you really think that the final victor will be? Shut up. Luo Yu roared and said coldly, Hanba, so what if karma can't do anything to you? No matter how strong you are, can you be stronger than the 6 sages? When we escaped, we already had no choice. Do you think that just because you've become the Nether King of this world, you can protect yourself from that turmoil? What a joke. If that black Jiao wanted to, it would have taken the position of Nether King long ago. Even the living beings after the ancient times can see clearer than you. You've really lived for so many years in vain. At this point, Luo Yu paused and looked meaningfully at Hanba. He continued, when this world is repaired, there's no reason for that person to let this place go. Over the years, which world hasn't there been any trace of the 6 sages descending? Even a broken world like the Tianwu world has been attacked by Mingi's minions. Do you think that when the 6 sages descend, you can escape death? As soon as he finished speaking, Hanba's body trembled slightly. As a zombie, she was not in the 3 realms and 6 paths. The power of karma could not affect her at all, so she could attack Lin Yuan. But even if the power of karma could not kill her, it did not mean that powerful cultivators or demonic beasts could not kill her. If this world was repaired and the 3 realms and 6 paths were established, the power that the world could bear would be greatly increased. At that time, the sages would be able to descend on this world. They were not existences that the indigenous worlds could resist. Now, in the various worlds outside the Eldritch world, either the spiritual chi of heaven and earth had dried up and cultivators had no space to live, or extremely powerful refugees from the Eldritch world and the Chosen One had joined forces to resist the attacks of Hongjuan's minions. But in the Tianwu world, there weren't many powerful refugees from the Great Desolation era here. The truly powerful existences wouldn't choose to settle down in a small world. In other words, a small world simply couldn't bear their power. The heavens chosen one of this world, He Jiao, wasn't very powerful. Not to mention existences from the Great Desolation era, even the top natives of the Tianwu world could easily defeat him. When he thought of this, Hitorigami seemed a little hesitant. Because she could not fight against the Eldritch world's creatures after the world was repaired. Without the help of the Chosen One, this world would have to face the Eldritch world alone before the allies of the other worlds realized the changes in the Tianwu world. If that was the case, the only outcome for this world would be to accept destruction or enslavement. Similar situations were common in other small worlds that had completed themselves. After hesitating for a while, Hanba stepped towards Lin Yuan again, but she slowed down, as if she was still thinking. If I become the king of hell and open up the underworld, my power will increase by leaps and bounds. Unless this world is destroyed, I will be an immortal existence. Do you think I will believe you just because you said a few alarmist words? Hanba raised her head and looked straight at Luoyu, who was flapping his wings, and said loudly. If you become the king of hell, I'm afraid you won't see the day when your power increases by leaps and bounds. Suddenly, Lin Yuan's voice rang out, although I don't have specific information, I am sure that the celestial sovereign has been born. Once the underworld is established, the human world will start to fight, just like in the investiture of the gods. Even if you kill everyone in the world, you will not be able to stop the establishment of the heavenly court. When the 3 realms are complete, any one of the 6 sages will be able to destroy your true spirit and refine the king of hell, who you say is immortal, into an obedient puppet. Chapter 895. I see. Hitorigami lowered its head slightly, allowing its messy hair to cover its face again. It seemed to be thinking about something. Luoyu continued to flap its wings and soar high in the sky. As a magic-type class that had lived for who knows how many years, it was well aware of its strengths and weaknesses. There was still water nearby. If Hitorigami made any strange moves, although it was no match for Hitorigami, it no longer needed to foolishly fight Hitorigami head-on like before. It could deal with any situation with ease. However, if it lowered its altitude, if it encountered a ruthless character like Hitorigami who cultivated both magic and martial arts, it would not be long before Hitorigami tore it apart. Luoyu flew high in the sky for its own safety and also as a deterrent to Hitorigami. After all, as long as it was alive, Hitorigami would not be able to easily approach Lin Yuan. Once Hitorigami turned hostile again, it would be equivalent to hardening its killing intent. Although the primeval creatures who had not shown themselves were not on good terms with Lin Yuan, they would not watch Lin Yuan die without doing anything. If it missed, it would be equivalent to facing all the primeval creatures. Retreat. Lin Yuan, who was wrapped around Lei Qiusheng's shoulder, suddenly tensed up and growled in Lei Qiusheng's ear. From the moment the clouds began to disperse, he could vaguely smell danger. If Hitorigami really restrained its killing intent, this sense of danger would naturally dissipate. After all, there was no such thing as a delay. If it wanted to kill, it would kill. Once the danger was resolved, it would not warn Lin Yuan again. This also meant that Hitorigami had wanted to kill him from the beginning. At this moment, when she lowered her head and pretended to be thinking, she was definitely not weighing the pros and cons. She was deceiving Luoyu. Hitorigami and Luoyu's ears were extremely sensitive. Almost as soon as Lin Yuan finished speaking, Luoyu had already mobilized the water and swept it towards Hitorigami, who was ready to strike. Hitorigami was even faster. The blood shadow around her trembled, and her speed skyrocketed. She was even faster than when she fought Luoyu. The rolling water did not hinder Hitorigami at all. It could even be said that the water was shaken off by Hitorigami before it could even catch a whiff of its exhaust. Fortunately, Lei Qiusheng had fled with Lin Yuan all the way here. Although he was in a state of confusion, his heart was as clear as a mirror. Just like when he was in power as an emperor, every decree, an imperial decree, was a game with the aristocratic families, sects, and nobles. Once a peace was made, it could not be reneged. As for how many people would die and how many people would be affected, it was not important to him. After all, a high and mighty person would not care about the feelings of ants. Now, the two positions had been reversed. Hitorigami and Luoyu were important people. Lin Yuan, who knew many secrets even though his cultivation was not high, could be counted as well. Only he and Yang Qinglin were placed in the position of ants. If anything happened to them, he and Yang Qinglin would definitely not be able to survive. Therefore, after being tied to the same rope as Lin Yuan, Lei Qiusheng chose to trust Lin Yuan unconditionally. When Lin Yuan spoke, his body reacted in the most honest way. With all his might, he retreated. Although Lei Qiusheng and Hitorigami's speed could not be compared, at this moment, this single step was the difference between the mortal world and the underworld. Because of Lei Qiusheng's subconscious retreat, he barely avoided Hitorigami's main area of attack. Like a blood pillar that reached the sky, a bloody aura rose from where Lei Qiusheng had been standing. Countless drops of blood were like sharp blades that strangled everything within the range of the blood pillar. Lei Qiusheng, who had retreated in advance, only felt a tightness in his chest. His entire body was sent flying. Moreover, at the critical moment, a layer of blood-red light screen rose. The moment Lin Yuan's incense power was exhausted, it filled the gap in the divine power barrier and barely protected this external incarnation of his. However, the blood-red light screen did not last long. The moment Lei Qiusheng was sent flying, the blood-red light screen had already shattered. If he had been a second late, Lin Yuan might have been ground into a pile of minced meat. Yang Qinglin, who had appeared 30 meters away in a flash, turned pale. He said while swaying, "Black Jiao, remember this. Today, you owe this seat a life. In the future, you will have to pay me back." Lin Yuan nodded slightly, but did not say anything. Therefore, although the cultivators of that era enjoyed the most primitive rules and the densest spiritual qi of the universe, their cultivation environment was undoubtedly the worst. They had to face the experts from the primeval world, the first-generation demonic beasts who had gained wisdom after obtaining cultivation methods, and their fellow Taoists who had gone mad. Not only the cultivators, but also the entire human race at that time found it difficult to move forward and was on the verge of destruction at any time. It was just like when Goddess Nviwa created the human race, when the weak human race faced the primeval creatures who had gained wisdom from the primeval world. To be able to find a suitable path of cultivation in that era, cultivate all the way to the Kongming realm, and even foresee their impending death, make arrangements in advance to resurrect countless years later, of course, they were not easy to deal with. Yang Qinglin saw it more clearly than Lei Qiusheng. Lei Qiusheng was just a grasshopper tied with a rope. Yang Qinglin, on the other hand, saw through the purpose of Luoyu. Luoyu was a top-level powerhouse who was not inferior to Hanba in other aspects, except that its magic was restrained by Hanba. The reason why it appeared here to confront Hanba was to protect Lin Yuan. If Lin Yuan died or escaped, Luoyu would never fight Hanba to the death like an iron-headed doll. At that time, when facing Hanba who had won, he would have no chance of survival even if he used all his trump cards. Protecting Lin Yuan was protecting himself. Lin Yuan also saw through this point, so he nodded tacitly. Even if Yang Qinglin was an ancient cultivator, he would not be able to recover his strength so quickly. Moreover, when he was at his peak, he was not a match for Hanba. Just now, he was able to withstand Hanba's attack, most likely because he had used some precious treasure. Looking at how he looked like he had suffered a backlash, it was possible that it was his natal magic weapon. This was a huge favor. According to karma, Lin Yuan should repay him with his life. Things like natal magic weapons were not things that could be casually refined like those in the novels of his previous life. In the untainted world, these things were usually associated with each other. This kind of treasure would not be easily damaged, but once it was damaged, even the lightest damage would cause one's cultivation state to drop by a level. You were lucky to be able to dodge it once, then, what about this attack? Hanba raised his head. Even the messy hair that covered his face could not hide his faint gaze. As he raised his hands, the blood-colored pillar of heaven began to tilt towards the area where Lin Yuan was, as if the firmament was being torn apart and the Milky Way was being reversed. Chapter 896. Yang Qinglin and Lei Qiusheng's expressions changed drastically as they looked at the falling blood-colored heavenly pillar. This was because they were very clear that this level of technique had already exceeded the scope of their abilities. In other words, it had already exceeded their understanding. If no powerful figure intervened, the three of them would definitely die. Only Lin Yuan looked indifferent, as if he was not the target of Hanba. After dodging the fatal attack that Hanba had launched while pretending to be thinking, the sense of crisis in his heart rapidly decreased. Obviously, a powerful figure of the untainted land who was hiding in the dark could no longer hold back. Therefore, this seemingly powerful attack was destined to be unable to hurt him. Hanba, we gave your father some face, but you treat us like ants. That's not right, is it? In the unseen world, another voice sounded. It sounded like a sigh, but it was filled with endless killing intent and piercing coldness. The void tore open, and a red-clothed figure walked out. The pale young man had a faint smile on his face, but there was no smile in his eyes. The moment he appeared, he gently patted the fiery red gourd at his waist. The gourd instantly flew up and expanded against the wind. In the blink of an eye, it was already covering the sky and the sun. Immediately, seemingly endless red sand was spat out from the gourd, hitting the blood-red pillar like a storm. The blood-red pillar disappeared at a speed visible to the naked eye. "Old man, how dare you spoil my cultivation? You deserve to die." Hanba raised her hand again, and her beautiful eyes were bloodshot. She stared coldly at Red Cloud Taoist as if she was looking at a corpse. In a complete world, Red Cloud might not be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with the 6 saints, but he was still an existence that was one step away from becoming a saint. In the untainted land, he would definitely be a powerful figure. Although he could not be compared to the 3,000 demon gods, he was not an ordinary person either. Hanba was indeed powerful, but in terms of age and cultivation, she was just a child in front of Red Cloud Taoist. However, it was different in the Tianwu world. No matter how high Red Cloud Taoist's cultivation was in the past, in this world, everyone's upper limit was actually the same. What they competed with was their own means and foundation. For example, Luo Yu's power was similar to Hanba's, but its means were restrained by Hanba. It could only be a deterrent. Under such circumstances, it was not difficult to understand why Hanba dared to talk nonsense to Red Cloud Taoist. After all, if this world was complete, she would definitely not do so. Even if she did, Red Cloud Taoist would have to fight with one of the 6 saints first. How could he have the time to argue with her? Let's see who's the real deal over there. Let's see who will die in our battle. Taoist Red Cloud was clearly embarrassed to be reprimanded by a junior. He had been too angry recently. Previously, in the Endless Sea, he had been humiliated by Lin Yuan because of the great karma on his body. He could only leave resentfully. Now that Lin Yuan was in danger, he had rushed to the northern frontier to save Lin Yuan. Originally, he wanted to use this opportunity to ridicule Lin Yuan. However, he did not expect that after he broke Hanba's means, before he could do anything to her, Hanba would start to clamor, as if she did not put him in her eyes at all. In his rage, he could no longer maintain his image as a good guy. Naturally, Red Cloud Taoist revealed his true nature. Whether it was spiritual companion items or innate spiritual roots, they were all based on the personality of the owner. For example, the great immortal Yang Mei who had mastered the law of space was a classic example. Including Pan Gu who had created the world and transformed into all things, Yang Mei could easily be ranked in the top 10 of the sky demon gods. It would not be an exaggeration to say that he could even be ranked in the top 3. However, when did such a person care about other things? Just like his original body, the Hollow Willow. As for Red Cloud Taoist's spiritual companion treasure, the 99 soul-scattering gourd, he hung on his waist. Even in the unscrupulous primitive world, there were not many existences who would casually ask for the souls of scattered people. Demon Master Kuan-Peng was tricked by Western sage Urshi, but only destroyed Red Cloud Taoist's physical body, not his primordial spirit. Even with the protection of the innate spiritual treasure, if someone like Demon Master Kuan-Peng really wanted to chase after him, how could Red Cloud Taoist escape? Speaking of which, the 99 soul-scattering gourd could be said to be a natural enemy for Hanba. As the ancestor of zombies, absorbing the essence of the sun and the moon was only the most basic cultivation for Hanba. Just like other cultivators, apart from meditating, Hanba also needed to consume spiritual treasures and elixirs. Hanba also knew how to kill and steal souls. Not only could he absorb blood to increase his cultivation, he also needed to refine the souls that were full of hostility and resentment into his own blood, turning them into an extremely vicious attack. Therefore, it was true that Red Cloud Taoist had dispelled the blood-colored pillar and disrupted Hanba's cultivation. Even if your father were here, he wouldn't dare to. Red Cloud Taoist cast the 99 soul-scattering gourd over his head and stared at Hanba with a cold look. However, before Red Cloud Taoist could finish, Hanba roared hoarsely, "You can't stop talking about that old bastard, can you? Even if I don't have this father and don't want the position of heavenly lady, I'm still the god of drought, a great devil. I've come this far on my own. Since when did we become like those rotten Taoists, who had to suppress others with their roots? Lin Yuan twitched his mouth. With Red Cloud's mouth, it was not surprising that he would be beaten to death. However, the problem was that this guy had a wide circle of friends. In the primitive world, everyone thought he was a nice guy, which surprised Lin Yuan. Hanba's father was indeed ferocious. In the later period of the Yan Emperor's era, he took advantage of the situation and fought with various tribes. He was invincible all the way and eventually created the situation of the Yan Emperor, the Yellow Emperor and Qiyu. After the Yan Emperor was defeated by Qiyu, he fought with Qiyu many times and unified the world. During his reign, there was no need to talk about his achievements. The 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors were not just empty titles. They were not real. Looking at the Yellow Emperor's life, there were many unethical things he did. Hanba was definitely one of them. After all, without this daughter, Chiyou's formation of bitter wind and bitter rain was enough to make the Yellow Emperor suffer. However, after the war, Hanba quickly became a demon and was hated by everyone. Humans can't, at least they shouldn't. Therefore, it was only natural for Hanba to hate the Yellow Emperor. After all, the Yellow Emperor could be said to have taken great credit for her downfall. Moreover, he had thrown everything to his daughter, who had turned into a demon, to bear the burden while he happily took over the Yan Emperor and began the reign of the Yellow Emperor. Red Cloud Taoist, on the other hand, not only did he destroy Hanba's cultivation, he said a total of 3 sentences. One sentence was ruthless, and the other 2 sentences were about the Yellow Emperor. It was as if they did not touch Hanba because of the Yellow Emperor's face. Otherwise, Hanba would be a piece of trash that could be casually crushed to death. With this style of speech, how could he have a wide circle of friends? If this was not strange, then what was? Chapter 897. Let's go, let's go. Lin Yuan took a deep breath and directly told Lei Qiusheng without lowering his voice. Putting himself in Hitorigami's shoes, if he were in Hitorigami's shoes, he would probably be fuming with rage at this moment. There was even a possibility that he would be killed on the spot. Even if the space collapsed and they perished together, it would not be a loss. No matter what, Red Cloud Taoist was a mighty figure who almost became a sage. He was also an innate creature in the untainted land. It was a great deal to trade 1 for 1. After all, once the world was repaired, the strength of the 2 sides would be pulled apart quickly. It would be difficult to kill him if he tried to talk his way out. But even if Hanba did not have the thought of exchanging 1 for 1, since he had already said so, it was impossible for them not to fight. If such experts were to fight, if not for the fact that Luo Yu had stopped them from fighting, the shockwaves from the battle would be enough to kill them 800 times over. If they did not run now, they would not be able to do so later. You can't escape. The killing intent in Hanba's eyes disappeared. She broke away from Red Cloud Taoist's mocking state and stared at Lin Yuan fiercely again. Lin Yuan tilted his head and said in a low voice, "Come on, I know what you're thinking. You know very well that once the 3 realms are repaired and the sages arrive in this world, you won't be able to defeat them even if you join forces. But this doesn't stop you from wanting to be the Yama King. After all, the sages will arrive after the world is repaired. If you kill me, not only will you be able to secure your position as the Yama King, these untainted creatures will also help you hunt down the candidates for the Celestial Emperor to prevent the 3 realms from being repaired. At that time, you'll have enough time to accumulate your foundation and ensure that you'll be safe when the sages arrive, right?" Just like how Hanba could break Luo Yu's means in the same realm, Red Cloud Taoist could also break Hanba's cultivation. The realm after real God depended on one's foundation and accumulation. Even if Hanba's basic attributes were 100 times higher than Red Cloud Taoist's, it would not be as good as Red Cloud Taoist's. If Hitorigami were to become the king of hell, she would definitely stir up a storm of blood. Once she had accumulated enough vengeful souls and chi of blood, it would not be so easy for Red Cloud Taoist to break her technique. Once she had accumulated to a certain extent, it would not be impossible for her to fight against a saint. After all, sages were not that strong, especially the sages after Hung-jun. They were fake sages to begin with. Whether it was the so-called primordial violet chi or the severing of 3 corpses, they were all evil paths. Before Hung-jun took control of the heavenly Tao, those old men were all masters who had directly attained primordial chaos. Each one of them was stronger than the last. There were even existences like Yang Mei and Shi Chen who had grasped the great Tao of space and time. Not to mention bullying juniors, they could directly crush those of the same level. Being a saint and having the strength of a saint were 2 different things. What was primordial chaos? Comprehending and grasping a great Tao meant directly attaining primordial chaos. To put it in a more profound way, it meant fusing oneself with the Tao. Reaching the saint realm without attaining primordial chaos was just fooling fools. It was like a demonic beast without innate magic skills. No matter how strong its attribute was, it would only be played to death by a cunning predator. Only those ignorant creatures of the untainted land at that time knew how powerful the 6 sages were. They did not even dare to resist and directly escaped from the untainted land. However, for Lin Yuan, who was in existence after the ancient times, it was another matter. Hung-jun said that there were only a limited number of sages and that the 6 sages were conferred. In fact, it was just a group leader setting up 6 administrators. However, in fact, there was no limit to the number of sages. Fusing oneself with the Tao meant attaining primordial chaos. If one could do this, he would be in the saint realm. In other words, in the original untainted land, everyone could be a group leader. However, Hung-jun, the group leader, turned it into a situation where all living beings desperately fought for the administrator position. After being pointed out by Lin Yuan, Hanbo was not anxious or angry. She just nodded and said coldly, "Yes, but even if you see through it, what can you do? When I kill you, I will be the king of hell of this world. This old man will have to hold it in even if he is dissatisfied." When she finished speaking, she curled her lips in disdain. Obviously, she was still dissatisfied with Red Cloud's previous words. Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes and said doubtfully, "Have you never thought about why you would have such an idea? Why did you choose to invade the northern frontier at this time and try to transform it into the underworld? In the end, it thinks that I am too slow and wants to use this method to elect a king of hell as soon as possible. So, have you never thought that the Celestial Emperor actually existed long ago? How is this possible?" Hanba and Red Cloud roared almost at the same time. Although the Jade Emperor in Zhang Byron's previous life was never liked, the Celestial Emperor was indeed supreme. Even if Zhang Byron was not in the top ranks, he was more than qualified to fight for the title of the number 1 person below the sage. After all, he did not go through the 132 billion tribulations for nothing. Zhang Byron could become a Buddha after going through 81 tribulations. His strength was imaginable. After all, he represented the heavens and was the supreme ruler of the gods. Although the Celestial Emperor was only the executor of the rules, the position of executor was not so easy. The 3 realms, the 4 lives, the 10 directions, and the 6 paths were all under the control of the rules. Although they each had their own master, in the end, they were still under the control of the Celestial Emperor. If an existence like the Celestial Emperor really appeared in this world, it was impossible for them not to know. Unless, Taoist Red Cloud suddenly raised his head and stared at the cloudless sky. He clenched his teeth, his right hand still forming a seal. After a while, his face suddenly turned as pale as a sheet of paper. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood, as if someone had struck his chest with a heavy hammer. Is there really a Celestial Emperor? When Hanba saw Taoist Red Cloud's aura suddenly become chaotic, he immediately asked in surprise. Red Cloud wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and nodded solemnly. He said in a dull voice, "It does exist. Just now, when I was calculating the heavenly mystery, it was just a glimpse. Before I could see the origin of the Celestial Emperor, I was directly beaten back." As his voice fell, he no longer paid attention to Hanba. Instead, he turned his head and looked at Lin Yuan. He said in a deep voice, "He hid it so well that even we did not find any clues." "How did you know?" It was impossible for them not to notice the birth of the celestial emperor. Even a heaven's chosen one like Lin Yuan could not escape. He was also targeted by Hanba for the position of the king of hell. Of course, this was also because the will of the world deliberately leaked information about Lin Yuan. However, the existence of the celestial emperor was not leaked at all. If Red Cloud had not suddenly calculated the heavenly mystery to investigate the celestial emperor, he would have been caught off guard. In order to prevent more secrets from being leaked, he exposed the existence of the celestial emperor and beat Red Cloud out. This was also the work of the will of the world. Chapter 898. Although the will of the world was not very intelligent, it was not stupid. It knew that these primitive creatures were not willing to let this world be completed, so it concealed the chi of the celestial ruler and planned to force Lin Yuan to become the king of hell to complete the three realms and promote the evolution of the whole world. However, it did not expect that such a secretive thing would be exposed by Lin Yuan. Hearing this, Lin Yuan was also embarrassed for a moment. After all, the eyes of the three big bosses fell on him. At this time, he certainly couldn't fool them by making up nonsense. The system certainly didn't want to take the blame for this. He couldn't tell the truth and tell them that he just said it casually to distract Hanba's attention so that it would be convenient to escape. He was willing to say it, but they had to be willing to believe him. Silence. A deathly silence. All eyes were focused on Lin Yuan, waiting for him to confess everything. Lin Yuan thought for a moment, then said faintly, "You need to deduce the mysteries of heaven for such a small thing. Do you have so much mana that you can't use it all?" The existence of the celestial ruler is not a secret. Although the Xinwu dynasty was not established for long, it usurped the throne and fought with the surrounding forces every year. Hengduan Mountains, the Qingjiang dynasty, the Shuangjian dynasty, and even the monsters in the Endless Sea. How many creatures died in it? Even if the Xinwu dynasty was not established for long, it should learn from the other big brothers and use the power of the country to cultivate a few Yin gods to monitor the territory and command the monsters and enemies who surrendered, right? Speaking of this, Lin Yuan turned his head and glanced at Lei Qiusheng beside him. He continued, "But the Xinwu dynasty is in a precarious situation. Obviously, it is on the verge of destruction. Various rebel armies have appeared out of nowhere. Even the Xinlin army, known as the Xinwu Shield, has been mobilized. Have you seen a Yin master active on the battlefield?" This, Red Cloud Taoist and Hitorigami looked at each other. At their level of cultivation, they could change several dynasties just by sleeping casually. Who would have the time to care about those mortals who were as weak as ants? However, what Lin Yuan said was reasonable. After all, the Xinwu dynasty was in such a mess, but they had never seen any Yin deities belonging to the Xinwu dynasty. This situation usually meant that there were two possibilities. Either the Yin deities of the Xinwu dynasty had been wiped out by the sky demon before things got out of hand, or they had collectively rebelled. The former was possible, but it was impossible for such a big matter to remain silent. Lei Qiusheng also couldn't just watch as his Yin gods were wiped out and foolishly cooperate with Sky Demon. After all, Sky Demon's ambition was written all over his face. If it was the latter, it wasn't impossible, but it couldn't be so coincidental, right? Did they all just happen to turn traitor at this time? Was there something wrong with their heads? There were Yin deities in every dynasty, but Yin deities were different from true gods in the cultivation world. They couldn't consume ordinary incense and could only rely on the fate of the country. The stronger the fate of the country, the stronger the Yin deities. They might even have a chance to condense a physical body and be reborn. On the other hand, without the nourishment of the fate of the country, the Yin deities would become weaker and weaker until they completely disappeared. Therefore, even if they wanted to rebel, it was impossible for all of them to die together with the Xinwu dynasty. Seeing that he was involved in this matter, Lei Qiusheng's face turned red. He stammered, this matter, actually I'm not too sure. It's just that the Shrine of Gods suddenly reported that they had lost contact with all the Yin deities. Even those who stayed in the Shrine of Gods all year round had disappeared without a trace. They couldn't be found in the Shinwu dynasty. It was as if they had disappeared into thin air. The disappearance of the Yin deities actually made you think of the existence of the Heaven Sovereign. This is really incredible. Daoist Red Cloud sighed with emotion. Then, his expression changed slightly. He gritted his teeth and said, taking away the Yin deities out of thin air. Aren't they afraid of losing the nourishment of the country's fate? Could it be that thing? At this moment, Luo Yu, whose presence was extremely weak, finally interrupted. He said in a muffled voice, it's definitely not that thing. After all, that thing is still in the Heaven Court. If you want to take it away, you have to ask the gods of the Heaven Court first. In this world, there's no such ruthless existence. But even if it's not, it's probably something similar. The conversation between Luo Yu and Daoist Red Cloud was no doubt an old riddle man to Lei Qiusheng and Yang Qinglin. However, to existences like Lin Yuan who came from the ancient times, these words were very straightforward. However, these two clearly had some scruples and didn't dare to directly say the three words, investiture of the gods. Take a bit of the true spirit and integrate it into the investiture of the gods. From then on, they would be the lackeys of the Heaven Court. As long as the investiture of the gods was not destroyed, they would not be free. They could only be ordered around by the person who controlled the investiture of the gods. Daoist Red Cloud and Hanba exchanged a look. They both took a few steps back. Although they were still on guard against each other, the hostile atmosphere had obviously weakened. No matter how tense these escaped prehistoric creatures were, the existence of the prehistoric world was still their common enemy. Moreover, it was undoubtedly the enemy with the highest priority. The will of the world could create a Heaven Sovereign without them knowing. It could also create a Hell King without them knowing. In other words, this world could be repaired at any time. Powerful enemies from the prehistoric world could also come at any time. Lin Yuan now had the upper hand. As long as he didn't die, no one could surpass him to become the Hell King. However, if Hanba succeeded today, it was hard to say whether she would be the next Hell King. What was certain was that this world had most likely begun to evolve. We have to find that Heaven Sovereign and kill him. A cold light flashed in Daoist Red Cloud's eyes. He reached out his right hand again, trying to calculate, as if he had to find the whereabouts of that Heaven Sovereign. However, Luo Yu gently shook his head and sighed. It's useless. Since the Heaven Sovereign has already been born, it's too late to say anything. Moreover, it has already created that thing. Even if you kill the Heaven Sovereign, so what? The existence that is ranked above that thing will descend to this world and choose a suitable Heaven Sovereign to bring back. At this point, he looked at Lin Yuan and continued, the most important thing now is to not let the Hell King appear. I suggest that we arrange for some experts to be responsible for protecting this kid. If he dies, we'll all be in trouble. Crisis averted. Fortune in misfortune. Lei Qiusheng's intense alarm bells suddenly stopped ringing. He looked at Lin Yuan somewhat enviously. Although the words of these big shots were confusing him, he could still understand some of the words that were not taboo or secret. It seemed that not only would Lin Yuan not die here today, he might even gain a super powerful bodyguard. Daoist Red Cloud did not seem to hear these words. He continued to calculate while vomiting blood. Hanba also turned her head, as if she was not willing to communicate with Luo Yu at all. Chapter 899. The scene once again fell into dead silence. The big shots present were all old foxes among old foxes. The so-called friendship and camp were all empty. Only benefits were real. These prehistoric creatures had no choice but to protect Lin Yuan. As long as Hung Jun gave them a smile, they might help Hitorigami kill Lin Yuan. If they counted on such an existence to protect them, they might as well count on their enemies to be merciful. Lin Yuan pursed his lips. His gaze shifted slightly, and he said in a deep voice, "No, I think the most important thing now is, At this point, Lin Yuan adjusted his body, pointed at Hitorigami with the tip of his tail, and continued, "You have to withdraw from the northern frontier. The transformation of the underworld is irreversible, but without the intervention of the caster, I'm still confident that I can draw in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth to cleanse the northern frontier. Otherwise, when this place really turns into the underworld, who knows what level of undying will be brewed." Although the mission given by the system was to kill the outer god, the current Lin Yuan was no match for Hitorigami. Moreover, the system did not give a deadline for completing the mission. Since there was a possibility of peace talks now, it was better to plan for the long term. There was no need to fight for a moment of anger. "Me?" Hitorigami was slightly startled. Immediately, his cold gaze swept past Lin Yuan. He said coldly, "Weren't you the one who planned the northern frontier to end up in this state for the sake of the position of the underworld king? Even if I wanted to do such a thing, the northern frontier should be crimson red at this moment." Lin Yuan. When Hitorigami's voice fell, he was dumbfounded. The transformation of the northern frontier into the underworld was very fast. The places without the protection of the Blackwater Dragon King Temple and the Beast Lord Kirin had almost turned into the Nine Nether Desolation. If the Yin energy, resentment energy, and death energy accumulated over time, no one knew what kind of terrifying netherworld creatures would be born. Even with the help of this world's will, it would not be easy to transform the northern frontier in such a short time. Therefore, the outer god's strength was definitely not weak. Hitorigami was undoubtedly one of the candidates who met the requirements. But in this situation, Hitorigami would not joke around with his life, and the prehistoric creatures would not watch this world be repaired. In the future, not to mention killing Lin Yuan, even getting close to Lin Yuan would be an extremely difficult task. Therefore, there was no need for her to be petty at this time. Not only would it be meaningless, but it would also make Lin Yuan more vigilant against her. In other words, the outer deity in the system's mission was not Hitorigami. She was just a smokescreen. Such a scheme, if it were not for the intervention of the untainted land creatures, which led to the current situation, Lin Yuan would not be a match for Hanba. He would either be captured and his soul would be refined, or he would have to give up all his outer body incarnations and the northern frontier and hide in the endless sea to cultivate. However, in that case, it would be equivalent to giving up the path of a true god, and he would only be a fake god for the rest of his life. The system did not give him a time limit to complete the mission, but it gave him the conditions for failure. If the northern frontier fell and all the temples were destroyed, the system would not give him the chance to start over again. When Lin Yuan died at the hands of Hitorigami, or when the system deprived him of the opportunity to become a god, then the position of god of hell would fall into the hands of the outer deity. Coupled with the cooperation of the Celestial Emperor, who had been keeping a lid on the situation since his birth, it would only be a matter of time before the three realms were restored. "You are heartless, and I am unrighteous. Do you really think that I can't find the outer deity?" The corners of Lin Yuan's mouth curled up slightly. His heterochromatic eyes were piercingly cold, and he did not restrain his hostility at all. On the other side, Lei Fan, who had been exposed by Lin Yuan, fled frantically. Even though he had become an immortal, the fear of being dominated by Lin Yuan had not diminished in the slightest. Moreover, he had died once, so he was more sensitive to the aura of death. Even though Lin Yuan had only used an outer body incarnation without cultivation, Lei Fan still believed that as long as Lin Yuan was willing, killing him would be as easy as flipping his hand. After all, the Black Jiao had too many secrets. Just the fact that he had transformed from a snake into a dragon was something that even the dragon clan of the Four Seas who had dominated the Endless Sea for countless years coveted. Furthermore, in the current chaotic world, there were many terrifying existences that were so strong that it made one's hair stand on end. Such an expert would definitely not appear out of thin air. However, Lei Fan had read a lot of books since he was young, but he had never seen any information related to those experts. He had not even seen their figures in the unofficial history books. However, Lin Yuan seemed to have an exceptional understanding of them. Even that mysterious expert who could bestow immortality to living beings and pull the dead back from their hazy wandering, who called himself the Death God, had once said that Lin Yuan was an existence of the same level as him. If such an expert was afraid of Lin Yuan, what reason did he have to look down on Lin Yuan? Blind arrogance would only bring destruction upon oneself. But, why do I feel so uneasy? Lei Fan stretched out his hand and clutched his chest. Even if he was an immortal, he could still feel his own heartbeat. At that moment, he could even feel that his heartbeat was increasing rapidly, as if it would break free from its restraints and squeeze out from his throat in the next second. Such a feeling was not unfamiliar to him. Previously, before he had such an opportunity, he had met that fox girl, Kagura, once. Even though she had already restrained herself and obediently stayed in the Demon Emperor's Association as a senior deacon, her authority was only below that of the vice president, but her reputation was not prominent. However, Lei Fan would never forget the first time he met Kagura, the feeling of being targeted by a top predator. The feeling of death always surrounding one's body was something that no one could endure except for those who sought death wholeheartedly. With his current level of cultivation, even if he were to face a murderous Kagura alone, he would not be afraid. But the feeling of being targeted by a top predator still made his heart palpitate. Moreover, he was very clear that this murderous intent came from the true ruler of the northern frontier. That's right. This time, not only did I set it up, I even impersonated Li Zhong and obtained a precious cultivation technique from it. This is a heavenly opportunity. If it did not target me, it would be strange indeed. Thinking of that, the corners of Lei Fan's mouth curled up slightly, as if he was rather satisfied with his gains. But when he went to investigate the information flow in his mind, the smile on his face suddenly froze and he asked in surprise, "Why, did it change?" He could not recall the contents of the cultivation technique that the Black Jiao had just passed down to him, but he was certain that what he saw at that time and what he was seeing now were two completely different things. His own sea of consciousness had been unknowingly tampered with by the Black Jiao. Lei Fan's soul almost left his body as he hugged his head with both hands, sweat dripping down from his forehead. Chapter 900. Having one's sea of consciousness tampered with was not a small matter to anyone. Because the sea of consciousness was related to the integrity of a person, if one's sea of consciousness was damaged, the lightest consequence would be losing one's soul. Losing one's soul meant losing all of one's memories and common sense. It was like a piece of white paper that had been stained with ink that had been washed clean. Not a single trace of ink could be seen. Even if one still looked the same as before, no one dared to say that they were still themselves after losing their soul. What was left behind by the previous owner were at most some small habits of the body. Of course, losing one's soul was different from losing one's memories. Losing one's memories was only being stimulated and one could still regain one's original memories. But once one lost one's soul, it was equivalent to having a different person living in the same body. As for faking one's death, although it was worse than losing one's soul, it was still acceptable. Because a cultivator who had fallen to this stage was equivalent to having his body paralyzed. He would not be able to control the movements of his body and could only lie there like a corpse. His 5 senses would also gradually disappear. But at least he was still himself. After death, he could still enter the cycle of reincarnation as a soul. But to an undying person like him, no matter if it was losing one's soul or faking one's death, it was an unbearable evil consequence. Disregarding the former, if it was the latter, would he have to lie there until the world was destroyed before he could be free? After trembling for a while and seeing that the Black Jiao did not take any further action, Lei Fan regained some of his calmness. Swallowing a mouthful of saliva, he once again began to sense the cultivation technique that Lin Yuan had left behind. After roughly reading through it, Lei Fan's breathing became heavy again. He muttered, "It's like this. It's actually like this. It's really incomparably profound. I wonder where that Black Jiao had found such a miraculous cultivation technique. And he was so generous, passing it down so casually." As his voice fell, the air was filled with the smell of lemons. When he first looked at this cultivation technique, it was actually just ordinary. But the more he read, the more interesting it became. From the entry level to the great attainment level, it directly merged with his own knowledge and thoughts. Compared to the cultivation technique that Lin Yuan had given to Li Zhong, it was definitely the one that was most suitable for him. If he started to cultivate according to this cultivation technique, then he would truly be able to achieve the great Tao. The threshold of the void realm would not even exist. So the transformation of this cultivation technique was actually not because the Black Jiao had done something to his sea of consciousness. It was because this cultivation technique was originally an incomparably unique existence. Previously, what he had seen was actually a cultivation technique that was suitable for Li Zhong. But when this mass of information took root in his sea of consciousness, it gradually merged with his own thoughts, and naturally evolved into this cultivation technique that was tailor-made for him. Back when he was the king of the northern frontier under the Black Jiao's command, he had not been treated so well. Not to mention that he had been taken advantage of by Lin Yuan for free, he had been restricted in whatever he wanted to do. Not to mention bestowing cultivation techniques, he had been treated like a tool, the kind that would take advantage of him and not own up to it. Why was it that when it came to Li Zhong, such a cultivation technique could be bestowed so casually? Was the difference in treatment between people really that great? He, Lei Fan, was from the prestigious Lei family, a side branch of the imperial family. No matter whether it was his knowledge or his methods, although he did not dare to call himself a dragon or phoenix among men, but he was at least above average. He did not dare to call himself a Kingzhua, but he was definitely qualified to be a governor of the border. How much stronger could that humble disciple called Li Zhong be compared to him? The jealousy in his eyes quickly faded away as Lei Fan slowly got up and muttered to himself, "Oh well, no matter what, this cultivation technique has already fallen into my hands. I'd better go and meet up with that fellow first. I just don't know if that Black Jiao's current methods and the forest of hungry ghosts that I had painstakingly set up would be able to keep him here." With a single thought, Lei Fan involuntarily began to imitate the movement techniques recorded in the cultivation technique, as well as some of the tricks of exerting force. His speed was now 3 times faster than when he had been fleeing right under the nose of Lin Yuan. As his proficiency level continued to increase, Lei Fan's speed continued to increase. It was just that he himself was not aware of this point, because at this moment, he had completely entered into a state of enlightenment. Even the feeling of being watched by someone was subconsciously thrown to the back of Lei Fan's mind. In actual fact, that was not an illusion, nor was it a psychological effect. As the one who imparted the scripture of living beings, Lin Yuan and Lei Fan had already established a kind of mysterious connection. It was also because of this connection that the deeper Lei Fan's cultivation of the tailor-made cultivation technique, the more powers of living beings he would be able to feed back to Lin Yuan. With this powers of living beings, Lin Yuan could easily take on the appearance of all the living beings under his command, and use all their powers. Even the appearance he imitated would not be seen through by the powerful beings. After all, after establishing this connection, as long as he accumulated enough powers of living beings, he would be able to create a replica of Lei Fan and put it on himself. At that time, he would be the real Lei Fan, just like the 6-eared macaque and Sun Wukong. Even if they stood side by side, no one would be able to tell who was the real one and who was the fake one. This level of cultivation technique could already be considered as a divine ability, and it was not something that could be seen through just by seeing through illusions. This was a power that was above the natural order. In the journey to the west, Sun Wukong's 72 transformations to avoid the 3 calamities had a similar effect. The 72 transformations were endless, and no matter what he turned into, it would have the corresponding abilities and characteristics. It could even counter the 3 calamities that were feared by the heavens. Although it was an extraordinary item, it was still just a divine ability, and was far from being as all-encompassing as the scripture of living beings. It was just that the 72 transformations did not incur the jealousy of the heavens, and did not have the harsh cultivation conditions of the scripture of living beings. Of course, that was just the basic usage of the scripture of living beings. As one of the basics, once a connection was established, Lin Yuan could use this connection to check the state of the cultivator of the scripture of living beings in real time. As long as the two of them were not separated by an entire world, what Lei Fan saw and heard would be what Lin Yuan saw and heard. Even what Lei Fan was thinking, as long as Lin Yuan was willing, he could check it at any time. He could even simulate Lei Fan's thoughts to carry out his thinking, so as to avoid revealing any characteristics that were completely different from the original body when he transformed into a living being. When Lei Fan had transformed into Li Zhong's appearance and appeared before Lin Yuan at an extremely fast speed, Lin Yuan had already become suspicious of him. The reason why he had passed down the scripture of living beings was firstly to lock onto Lei Fan and strike at the so-called Northern Restoration Society. Secondly, it was a form of revenge against the will of the world for setting him up. However, he did not expect to hit the mark by a stroke of luck. The existence that was transforming the northern frontier into the underworld was not the most suspicious Hitorigami, but the Langya board that had been lurking somewhere in the northern frontier all this while. Now that Lei Fan had tricked him into entering the forest of hungry ghosts, he would definitely return and report it. By then, he would be able to ferret out the outer deity. Chapter 901. Other than this lucky hit, Lin Yuan was still prepared to spread the universal scripture. After all, the system was helping him to conceal the heavenly secrets to take revenge on this insatiable world will. Before this matter was exposed, it would be a waste not to use it. Who would not desire a power that was above the rules, or even the power to set and modify the rules? After all, he had been hunted down by Lin Yuan, who was supported by the world will. As he was worried that the battle between the child of the dimension and the transmigrator might lead to his death, Lin Yuan had no choice but to rely on the system's power to hide. Although the relationship between the two was ambiguous, as long as Lin Yuan was not the Netherworld King, the World Will would not have the intention to destroy him and replace him with a new Netherworld King. If it weren't for the existence of the system and the prehistoric creatures, Lin Yuan could only choose a place with good feng shui for himself and order a coffin for himself in addition to taking over the position of the King of Hell if he didn't have the system and the prehistoric creatures. After all, the greatest obsession of this world will was never to make the world have good feng shui, but to mend the world so that it could advance to the level of the heavenly axiom. In order to achieve this goal, it would definitely do anything. Lei Fan, your shallow knowledge has always been your weakness. Even after dying once, you are still so careless. Looks like your death was not in vain. Sensing that Lei Fan was already engrossed in the universal scripture, Lin Yuan could not help but laugh. He shook his head and threw away all the distracting thoughts in his mind as he continued to observe Lei Fan. The system's mission was to kill an outer god. Even if the other party was not as strong as Hitorigami, he was still a god. His bottom line was much higher than Lin Yuan's. As for the prehistoric creatures, they could not be counted on. It was not surprising that they could stop Hitorigami, but this did not mean that they would fight the outer god for Lin Yuan. If he wanted to fight, it was obviously unrealistic to rely on his avatar. Not to mention that he did not have so much incense power to waste. Even if he did, why would he do something like taking off his pants to fart? They could accumulate incense power, and as long as the time was right, they could be used directly. Moreover, their cultivation was not any weaker than the main body. If they hid in the dark, it was equivalent to giving himself an extra life. In this situation, even if he forcefully used incense power to increase the cultivation of his avatars, it would not be beneficial to the overall situation. After all, in the eyes of Hitorigami and Taoist Red Cloud's eyes, one level 8 desolate demon was no different from two, they were all ants that could be easily crushed. There was nothing wrong with his brain. Why did he have to waste the power of incense? He did not deny that he was afraid of death. Back then, he had arranged so many avatars to leave himself a way out. However, ever since he had obtained the scripture of all living beings, his horizons and plans had skyrocketed. He had a better plan for the use of these avatars. However, before leaving the northern frontier, he needed to confirm how bad the situation at the northern frontier had deteriorated, and how much time he had left to set up his plans in the Endless Sea. Or, if the northern frontier needed him to return immediately to oversee it, or if he could complete the system's mandatory mission in the Endless Sea, allowing his strength to undergo a qualitative leap. At the same time, he could borrow Lei Fan's eyes to see what cultivation level this outer god that the will of the world had taken a fancy to was. Boring, I'm leaving. Hitorigami's eyes, which were hidden under his messy hair, flashed a bloody light. He shook his green sleeves and turned into a bloody shadow to escape. After Hitorigami had completely left, Red Cloud Taoist let out a faint sigh and said in a deep voice, I don't know how many years it will take for her to understand her father's painstaking efforts. She will always have the temperament of a child. Luo Yu looked in the direction where Hitorigami had left and let out a faint sigh as well. He agreed and said, she will not understand. Her father has always protected her very well. The so-called 5 emperors are just a chess piece in that person's hand. In that chaotic situation back then, there were only a few who managed to escape unscathed. Yinglong is one of the dragon ancestors. Her strength and background are both above average. It is all thanks to her father that which was able to avoid that calamity. Ever since Hung Jun had become the ruler of the world, the entire chaotic world had been filled with mutual deception. The only difference was that one's table manners were elegant or ugly. The 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors sounded like a great title, but they were just a few chess pieces in that person's hand. Lin Yuan, who had heard everything, thought for a while and soon realized that this was Red Cloud Taoist's way of reminding him and showing his goodwill. After all, although this kind of thing was known by many people, it was definitely a secret. In the history books, it was mostly the same as the secrets that those powerful big shots could not mention. The secrets of those big shots were not so bad. After all, they were all mortals. Hundreds of years later, they would be easily manipulated by others. However, most of the secrets that the primitive creatures knew came from the extremely powerful primitive creatures. Basically, they were existences that could survive the destruction of the world. After all, it involved the 5 emperors, and was called a calamity. It was not hard to imagine how powerful the chess player was. Even Daoist Red Cloud, who was so tyrannical, had to be afraid of such an existence. This kind of seemingly casual conversation was impossible to be unintentional. They were deliberately leaking some ancient secrets to Lin Yuan. Following the conversation between Red Cloud Taoist and Luo Yu, Lin Yuan's eyes slowly widened. He tried his best but could not suppress the shock in his heart. At this moment, he even felt that his worldview had been shattered. The chaotic world was not a world. The so-called Great Thousand World, Middle Thousand World and Small Thousand World were not naturally formed. They were all created by the powerful beings in the chaotic world, just like how Pengu created the world. The chaotic world created by Pangu was more like a universe that included these worlds of different sizes. Hung Jun, who had mastered the way of heaven, was as terrifying as the ultimate of this universe. This was the first time that Lin Yuan knew that the chaotic universe could be explained in this way. However, it was not groundless to say that the powerful beings in the chaotic world were all gods of creation. For example, there was the heaven-opening scripture of the Grand Supreme Elder in the Taoist canon. In the Journey to the West, there was also a record of the Grand Supreme Elder holding the talisman and opening the sky. The so-called Journey to the West was actually a private server opened by the Grand Supreme himself. In this private server, the Grand Supreme even created numerous avatars and played the roles of Pangu, Goddess Nuwa and other powerful beings in the chaotic world. However, what was intriguing was that there seemed to be no Hung Jun in this world. Perhaps, as recorded in the Journey to the West, the square inch was the heart, the beer was the heart, the moon and the stars were also the heart. The so-called Journey to the West was just a dream in the Grand Supreme's heart. Chapter 902. However, just like the investiture of the gods, the Journey to the West was also a calamity. It happened before. In that cultivation tribulation, there was actually a deeply hidden game that had yet to be uncovered. Very few people even paid attention to it, but it made countless cultivators and demons who were active at that time tremble in fear. Only Hanbo was one of the few who did not know the truth. Since ancient times, there had been sacrifices. There were only 2 major events in a country. One was sacrifice, and the other was war. They were sacrifice and war. It was just that the initial object of worship evolved from the original, heaven, to the existence of the emperor. Especially after the fall of the Shang dynasty and the establishment of the Zhou dynasty, this emperor also had a taboo name, which was the so-called god of Haotian. In the myths, he was the symbol of heaven, the lord of gods. However, in the game between Haotian and Taishang, Haotian was defeated by Taishang and died. The successor was Zhang Yuyu, the Jade Emperor, who was known as Zhang Bairen because he was obviously very strong but always liked to be patient. A human from the mortal world was chosen by Taishang to be the Lord of Gods and completely replaced God of Haotian. As for the game that defeated the Lord of Gods, it was probably during the Warring States period. The school of Yin Yang believed that every dynasty and state had virtues, which were the 5 virtues of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. Although the school of Yin Yang did not develop it, this theory had been passed down. At the same time, the school of Yin Yang also believed that a country's characteristics should be in line with its virtues. The colors of its flag and armor should also be in line with its virtues. At the same time, the 5 elements promoted and restrained each other. When a dynasty was abdicated and inherited, it promoted each other. When a new dynasty replaced the old one through war, it was a restraint. For example, Emperor Yan belonged to the fire element. The Yellow Emperor replaced it with earth, which meant that earth replaced fire. Yao gave the throne to Shun, which meant that water replaced metal. Later on, Shun gave the throne to Yu, which meant that wood replaced water. In the era after the fall of the Shang dynasty, it was basically a story of the restraint of virtues. Even the Qing dynasty had such a saying. After destroying the Ming dynasty of the Fire dynasty, they called themselves the Qing dynasty of the Water dynasty. This thing was very mysterious. When the Nurhaci dynasty was established, it belonged to the Jinda dynasty. Ning Yuanji was defeated by the Ming dynasty and changed the name of the dynasty to the Qing dynasty. However, it successfully replaced the Ming dynasty and became the last dynasty of the feudal period. In a world without superstition, this was just a coincidence or a man-made story. However, in the mythical world, it was definitely a big deal. In Taoist Red Cloud's story, Zhou Yan, who was called Zhou Zi, was most likely the Grand Supreme sock puppet. After all, it was an indisputable fact that the school of Yin Yang originated from the school of Taoism. Taoism, on the other hand, came from the Grand Supreme's orthodoxy. Therefore, this wave was actually the Grand Supreme using a sock puppet to mess with the Heavenly Emperor. Zhou Yan came up with a set of theories about the 5 colored emperors and the 5 virtues. After spreading it in the human world, the 5 emperors officially became the 5 elders of the 5 directions. They took away a considerable part of the Heavenly Emperor's power and indirectly led to the fall of the Heavenly Emperor. What was more interesting was that the first emperor of the immortal Qin dynasty, who was called the Ancestral Dragon, was even laughed at for being a boneless person. Because of the prevalence of the school of Yin Yang, the state of Chu claimed that the descendants of the Yan emperor belonged to the earth virtue. The state of Yan claimed that they belonged to the Zhou royal family, but they came up with a series of reasons and claimed that they belonged to the water virtue. At that time, all the other countries were like this, except for the state of Qin. This was because among the 7 kingdoms of the Warring States period, only the state of Qin did not clearly declare their own virtue. According to convention, the Great Qin should belong to the fire virtue, and the entire country should be red. However, anyone who had a little understanding of history knew that the state of Qin was black. It was only after the state of Qin had swept through the other 6 countries that they suddenly turned around and claimed to be the water virtue. This was completely in line with the theory of the 5 virtues. The state of Qin's actions were equivalent to making a fool out of the Heavenly Emperor. This was because when the 5 colored emperors were brought up, they were given the authority of the 5 seasons of winter and summer, wind and rain. This was equivalent to pushing the 5 emperors to the front, taking away a large portion of the Heavenly Emperor's authority. Of course, the Heavenly Emperor was not willing to do this, and he did not completely fall out with the Heavenly Emperor. As such, he could only act in the human world. Back then, the only country that did not declare its own virtue naturally became the Heavenly Emperor's supporter. Even though there were always some TV writers who said that Great Qin had conquered the world because it had too much food, it was true that Great Qin had conquered the world because of food. For example, many people blamed the state of Zhao's destruction on Zhao Kuo, who was an armchair strategist, but how many people knew that Zhao Kuo had actually taken the blame? Just like in the story of Journey to the West in the Phoenix Immortal County, because they had offended the Heavenly Emperor, there had been no rain for 3 years. The 3 countries, Yan, Zhao, and Han, had all encountered a great drought. The country of Zhao did not have enough food to sustain its army, so it could only replace Lianpa, who was in charge of defense, and let Zhao Kuo take over as the commander of the Battle of Changping. This was to find an opportunity to fight a decisive battle with Great Qin. After all, during the Battle of Changping, Zhao Kuo had still been able to come up with a plan to break out of the encirclement despite not having enough food for 46 days. What's more, the soldiers under his command were willing to follow him. This was not something that a general who was an armchair strategist could receive. No matter which world's army it was, they would only respect the strong. In this battle, the Heavenly Emperor had won by half a point. After Great Qin had swept through the 6 countries and unified the world, Yingzheng, who was called the Ancestral Dragon, had tried to restore the human king system and stop boasting about his talent. Instead, he had created the title of Emperor. This action not only had the Heavenly Emperor been defeated by the Heavenly Emperor, but it had also offended many higher beings. That was why Great Qin had fallen for 2 generations. Lin Yuan's path of the ancient totem god was mainly about sacrifices. It was just that his cultivation had not reached the required level and he had not ignited his godly flame, so he had to borrow the system's power to perform sacrifices. However, he still had some understanding of this. The Zhou dynasty had fallen 800 years ago, and the marquises had fought for supremacy. The 7 heroes of the Warring States period, the 100 schools of thought, and Great Qin had swept through the 6 countries. This heart-rending drama in history had only been a battle between the Heavenly Emperor and the Heavenly Emperor. Apart from this, Lin Yuan suddenly realized that after the Yellow Emperor had ascended to the Heavenly Realm, only 2 people had not followed him. The Winged Dragon and Hitorigami had both used up most of their divine power and ascended to the Heavenly Realm. As such, one of them had wandered in the north and the other in the south. Compared to the Winged Dragon returning to the south, Hitorigami, who had been imprisoned in the Great Wasteland, was evidently the Yellow Emperor's last attempt to protect his daughter. Chapter 903. Hanba, who had been refined into a zombie, had become a walking disaster. No matter where she went, she would be beaten, scolded, and expelled. At this time, Hanba would find that without the protection of the Yellow Emperor, her achievements were gradually forgotten. Those who liked her would gradually disappear in the passage of time. All the beautiful things she had seen would gradually become a bubble in her memory. This was very sad. However, compared to ascending to the heaven realm, it was much better to become a pawn of the Grand Supreme. After all, the Haotian Emperor was the incarnation of heaven. He was the master of gods and the supreme god in the heaven realm. Even the Grand Supreme was nominally his subject. The Grand Supreme's action was no different from a rebellion. The 5 emperors were just a knife chosen by the Grand Supreme. The Yellow Emperor had no choice from the beginning. The only thing he could do was to keep his daughter away from this dispute. Whether she was hated by others or became a demon, it was much better than being inexplicably annihilated, wasn't it? Lin Yuan's eyelids twitched slightly. He also looked in the direction where Hanba disappeared and asked in confusion, but the problem is, hasn't the outcome of that game been decided long ago? Why is Hanba still? Everything is fate. It's not up to people. Taoist Red Cloud shook his head and said with a bitter smile, the creatures of the untainted land, the gods and Buddhas, the cultivators of qi refining, demons, ghosts, and even ordinary people have to be counted. All they want in their lives is freedom. However, there is only one person who can achieve this. Who can guarantee that they will not become a pawn of others after a while? Since she is not in the game, why should we drag her into the game for the so-called truth? Lin Yuan looked sideways and quietly waited for Taoist Red Cloud to continue. It's rare to see someone like her in the entire untainted land. How many of us don't look forward to such a life? However, we all know that it's impossible. So, we are already very satisfied just by looking at her. Taoist Red Cloud's face turned solemn, and his tone was somewhat pleading. He continued, I've lived for so long, and I've eaten more than anyone you've ever met. When you looked at Zhao before, your eyes were calm, but there was obviously killing intent. Just take it as I'm begging you. Unless the two sides really fight to the death, please don't kill this child. Lin Yuan awkwardly turned his gaze to the side. Due to the system's mission, Lin Yuan already harbored murderous intent towards Hidorigami. In addition, Hidorigami had been chasing and teasing him all this while. The murderous intent in his chest had almost solidified. However, it was difficult for the WYRM's face to show any expression. Even his gaze could be restrained so that others would not be able to see through him immediately. However, he did not expect Taoist Red Cloud to be able to observe him in such detail. Lin Yuan was silent for a moment before he slowly said, My killing intent is not directed at her, but at the existence that is trying to turn the northern frontier into the underworld. Taoist Red Cloud nodded slightly, but did not continue on this topic. Previously, when he was divining the location of the Celestial Emperor, he had suffered a loss. The Celestial Emperor who had been born long ago but had been holding back was always under the protection of the will of the world. Now, although Lin Yuan was the first candidate to become the Underworld King, he was definitely not the one that the will of the world favored the most. That fellow who had caused the northern frontier to fall into such a state was most likely also under the protection of the will of the world. If he were to try to divine the other party's location, it would be difficult and unrewarding. At the same time, through Lei Fan's eyes, Lin Yuan saw for the first time what the outer deity who had caused chaos in the northern frontier looked like. This fellow had a body similar to a human's, except that his entire body was pitch black. Even his facial features could not be seen. Only a pair of eyes were a strange blood red. The way he had appeared was also very strange. He had slowly crawled out from Lei Fan's shadow. Furthermore, Lei Fan, who was engrossed in the scripture of life, obviously did not realize that his current boss had appeared by his side. He still maintained his previous posture and expression, constantly running and flashing around the surrounding forest. As for the outer deity, he did not have any intention of disturbing Lei Fan. Just like Lei Fan's shadow, he followed Lei Fan's movements and also constantly moved around with Lei Fan. He even tilted his head, his blood-red eyes obviously showing that he was thinking about something, Shadow Demon, Su Yan. Lin Yuan quickly thought about it in his mind. Very quickly, he connected this outer deity who was hiding in Lei Fan's shadow with a once famous evil god in the Tianwu continent. It was just that although this evil god was not very serious, as a member of the Yin god system, he was able to subdue the Shadow Walker and Sword Dancer, two organizations that were completely made up of assassins and killers. This was because this shadow demon could bestow upon his followers the ability to conceal themselves. Some of the more powerful killers could even hide in their target's shadow, and deliver a fatal blow at the crucial moment. Therefore, many killers held the attitude that they would rather believe in the existence of this Su Yan in their own homes. Therefore, even if Su Yan did not have the support of the Empire's destiny, he could still walk freely under the sun. He could be considered as one of the stronger deities who had once shown their divinity in front of people. If he was targeted by this guy, it would be troublesome. After all, in the Tianwu world, Su Yan's position was definitely the ancestor of all killers. His assassination ability was imaginable. Previously, Lei Fan was able to transform into Li Zhong's appearance and disappear right under his nose. It should be Su Yan's ability, right? However, although this guy was a dark deity, no matter how one looked at it, he did not seem to have anything to do with the deities of the underworld. Why was this guy coveting the position of the underworld king? Luring that black Jiao into the forest of hungry ghosts, and even swindling a set of martial arts from it? That's interesting. Su Yan's voice rang out in Lin Yuan's consciousness. Under Lin Yuan's special attention, there was almost no delay at all. Moreover, even if Lin Yuan missed it, he would be able to use the universal life force to check the memories of these cultivators. He would not miss any details, and could even watch it repeatedly. Taking revenge on the Black Jiao is my goal. Now, you should tell me your goal, right? Lei Fan's voice rang out as well, his tone filled with dissatisfaction. It was most likely because his state of enlightenment had been disrupted by Su Yan. Enlightenment was something that could be said to be a common occurrence for cheaters. But to the majority of cultivators, they might not even encounter it more than a few times in their entire lives. Lei Fan being able to make use of the universal life force scripture to enter a state of enlightenment could be considered a great opportunity. But after Su Yan merged with his shadow, he was immediately jolted awake from his state of enlightenment. It would be strange if he did not have any resentment. Chapter 904. My goal. Su Yan pondered for a moment, then suddenly smiled and said, "Of course, it is to kill that Black Jiao and obtain the position of King of Hell." Black Jiao, is that what you are thinking now? Just as Su Yan finished speaking, Lin Yuan's expression changed and he almost collapsed. But on second thought, the scripture of all living beings was after all a cultivation technique created by the great god Pan Gu. Even if all the almighty beings in the ancient times were the god of creation, strictly speaking, how many of them could be compared to the great god Pan Gu? All the big and small worlds added together, weren't they all based on the ancient times? Even if this cultivation technique was seen through by others, the other party would have to be at the same level as the great god Sky Demon. If not, it would have to be Hung Jun, Sanqing or other ancient almighty beings who had eaten the first batch of benefits after splitting open the heavens. Su Yan. A mere evil god of the sky martial arts sect, was he worthy? He was just trying to trick me. Lin Yuan's eyes turned slightly, then he calmed his mind again. What do you mean by that? Lei Fan's expected resentment dissipated slightly, and he asked doubtfully. After escaping from the forest of hungry ghosts, he had been feeling uneasy, as if Lin Yuan was always watching him. He had originally thought that it was just a psychological effect, but these words from Su Yan's mouth made him feel even more uneasy. After a moment of silence, Su Yan said slowly, "It's all right, I was just trying to trick him. You said it before, that the Black Jiao had been suspicious of you ever since you appeared in front of him. No matter whether he realized it at the time, or slowly figured it out after the fact, it is hard to say what he has done to you. After all, the cultivation technique you are talking about is indeed strange and evil. I have lived for so many years, but I have never heard of a cultivation technique that can be changed by itself after being memorized, to become a cultivation technique that is completely compatible with the user." This, Su Yan paused, as if organizing his words, before continuing, "This does not seem to be an inanimate object like a cultivation technique. Previously, when I was traveling the world, I heard of an evil being in the Green River Southern Wastelands that had similar effects." Green River Southern Wastelands? Are you talking about? Lei Fan swallowed a mouthful of saliva and mumbled, "Demon Venerable Qing Zhang's Gold Squandering Cave, Tender Village?" The all-beings scripture evolves according to the characteristics of all living beings. The evil creatures in the southern wasteland of the Green River have similar effects. This is interesting. Lin Yuan's gaze shifted as he muttered softly. The demon Venerable Qing Zhang's name was like thunder to the ears in the Tianwu continent. 300 years ago, he appeared out of nowhere and severely injured a group of Qing Jiang cultivators. Then, with a palm strike, he encircled almost the entire southern part of Xinjiang and named it the Southern Wasteland. Just like Lin Yuan's northern frontier, he established his own country. At the same time, he did not lose to the Xinjiang and Yun empires. In the past 300 years, he was definitely a legendary existence. The Xinjiang Empire was easy to deal with. After all, their entire country was proficient in water battles. Although the southern wasteland had many lakes, the demonic beasts there had a greater advantage. In addition, there were poisonous obstacles everywhere and the terrain was complicated. The Xinjiang army could not take down the southern wasteland, and the Xinjiang cultivators could not defeat the demon Venerable. However, the Yun Empire that bordered the Xinjiang was 80% swampy and forested land, similar to the terrain of Yunnan in Lin Yuan's previous life. Their soldiers were extremely proficient in fighting in such terrain, but they still could not take down the tough bone in the southern wasteland. What was even more legendary was that the Qing, Jiang and Yun empires had been fighting with the southern wasteland demon kingdom for so many years, but no one could say what kind of existence the demon venerable was. Some said that the demon venerable was actually a human, but he could mix with demonic beasts and command the demons in the southern wasteland. Some said that the demon venerable was a tiger demon. After all, the palm strike that encircled the southern wasteland was a tiger claw. Some said that the demon venerable was a demonic beast with dragon blood. He once smashed a monk in the Kongming realm with his dragon tail. These rumors about the appearance of the great demon venerable came from the great cultivators who had fought with the demon venerable. However, everyone had different opinions. No one thought that they were wrong, and there were even many people who fought and killed because of this. However, this mysterious demon venerable was elusive. Although he raised countless demonic beasts, he formed his own lineage and had no connection with the Hengduan Mountains or the Endless Sea. Some people speculated that if the demon venerable took one step further and took over the entire Qing River, he would form his own demon lineage. At that time, the three demon lineages would join forces and nearly a quarter of the world would fall into the hands of the demonic beasts. The scene of the demonic beasts running rampant in the continent in the past would probably happen again. However, the difference between him and Lin Yuan was that after this demon venerable took over the southern wasteland, he restrained his ambition and no longer sought for an inch of land. Instead, he established two sacred places that everyone in the world spit on and yearned for. One was the Gold Squandering Cave, and the other was the Land of Warmth. When people mentioned these two places, they couldn't wait to destroy them. However, those who had been to these two places would linger and forget to return. Even when they were buried in a foreign land, they didn't mention the word regret. Let's talk about the Gold Squandering Cave first. It was originally an inconspicuous mountain forest in the southern wasteland. The demon venerable used his supreme power to move the mountains and connect them to the demon lineage. He also set up 72 caves. It was known as the biggest underground market in the Tianwu continent. No matter if it was the cultivation world or the mortal world, as long as it was something with a name, it could be found in the Gold Squandering Cave's storehouse. Even those lost things that were lost by the predecessors or buried underground would occasionally appear. In addition, the demon venerable also had a group of skilled craftsmen. No matter what it was, as long as it was in the Gold Squandering Cave, there was nothing that could not be replicated. Although most of these replicas were not as outstanding as the real thing, they were still worth the money. There were even many ancient records of sects that had lost their inheritance in the Gold Squandering Cave. It was the demon venerable's armory that all the loose cultivators in the world yearned for. Every year, there would be some lost or newly created cultivation techniques or martial skills. As long as there were enough resources, even a loose cultivator could learn the secrets of the various sections. The remaining inheritances of the sects were not easy to learn. After all, if one was caught red-handed, the experts of the sects would cripple the person's cultivation. However, the inheritances of the sects that had lost their heirs, although they were expensive, every single copy that was printed could be said to be in short supply. In the entire Tianwu continent, it was hard to say which sect had not visited the Gold Squandering Cave to buy their lost ancient records, or to learn from other sects' ancient records. In the past, Taoist red dust was a frequent customer of the Gold Squandering Cave. Or it could be said that the entire red dust assembly served Taoist red dust when he went to the Gold Squandering Cave to buy ancient records from various sections. The resources that flowed like water, other than the portion that was used to maintain the red dust assembly, were all sent to the Gold Squandering Cave. Other than the underground black market and the demon venerable's armory, the Gold Squandering Cave also had all kinds of basic necessities. Even gambling houses, boxing arenas and other facilities that were banned by the various great empires were not uncommon. It would often attract rich guests who threw away their money. Chapter 905. The Gold Squandering Den could be said to be the #1 underground black market in the Tianwu continent, as well as the #2 entertainment sacred ground in the Tianwu continent. Just based on the gold squandering den, when the flow of customers was high, the profits of a single day were comparable to the profits of the Chamber of Commerce in a month when Lin Yuan first opened up the market for controlling spiritual items. A full 300 years. One could imagine how wealthy that demon venerable was. After talking about the gold squandering den, it was time to talk about the gentle village. Because of this existence, Lin Yuan had noticed demon venerable Qing Jiang, who had rarely appeared in the past 300 years. This was because Li Zhong would occasionally go to the Blackwater Dragon King Temple to pray and contact Lin Yuan, saying that demon venerable Qing Jiang was attempting to open a gentle village branch in the northern frontier. If not for the Demon the Arch Association's ability and Luo Su's ruthlessness, the gentle village branch in the northern frontier would have been completed. As the #1 entertainment sacred ground in the Tianwu continent, the gentle village was actually a brothel. The ladies there were proficient in zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting. Other than that, there were also demi-humans with mixed blood, slaves from the various empires, and even some chivalrous men and women from the mortal world. As long as the customer made a request, the gentle village would satisfy the customer. Regardless of male or female, as long as one went to the gentle village to seek pleasure, they would no longer be interested in ordinary women. They would go to the gentle village again and again, and it could be said that they enjoyed themselves so much that they forgot to return. Other than that, the drinks and dishes in the gentle village came from all over the world. Regardless of whether it was the famous wine or the home-brewed wine, the menu was complete. The chefs working there were also famous existences in the world. Any dish that was sold to the mortal world would be worth tens of thousands of gold. Even if the nobles of the various empires wanted to eat it, they would have to go through a lot of trouble. Furthermore, the gentle village did not require money. Even if a penniless beggar entered the gentle village, he would be able to enjoy the treatment that even the emperor would not be able to enjoy. But as the saying goes, lust is a bone-shaving knife. The land of warmth and tenderness indeed didn't require money because what was collected there wasn't money or spiritual items, but the essence energy and spiritual essence unique to every living being. When a human's spiritual essence was damaged, they would wither and become seriously ill. Even cultivators were the same. Losing a little bit of spiritual essence would decrease the efficiency of their cultivation. If their spiritual essence was depleted, they would die on the spot no matter how high their cultivation was. The spiritual essence of demonic beasts was the same. If they lost half of their spiritual essence, they would return to their original form and become wild beasts. If they lost all of their spiritual essence, they would die on the spot. The extracted spiritual essence was not wasted either. It was all refined into various elixirs by the demon venerable. Some of them were used to supplement one's innate spiritual essence. Even those who had no cultivation aptitude could embark on the path of cultivation after eating this kind of elixir. The more they ate, the better their aptitude would be. Some of them were used to prolong one's life. Every elixir that entered the market would be snatched up. Such elixirs were sold by the pill. Any one of them would be equal to the total income of the gold squandering cave for half a year, or even more. When people talked about the land of warmth and tenderness, they would definitely curse, wishing that they could destroy that dirty place. But the number of customers who went to the land of warmth and tenderness increased, and the elixirs refined by the land of warmth and tenderness became more and more popular. If there was anyone in the Sky Martial continent that didn't do business with the land of warmth and tenderness, it would be the northern frontier. The northern frontier was in need of money, but this kind of money, regardless of whether it was Lin Yuan or Li Zhong, they disdained to earn it. In the eyes of the great spirit demon venerable, regardless of whether it was a human or a demonic beast, there was no difference. They were just livestock that were being raised. They continued to bring all kinds of treasures and cultivation techniques into the gold squandering cave, causing the business of the gold squandering cave to become more and more prosperous. Their inventory grew more and more, and their reputation grew bigger and bigger. There were even people who went to the land of warmth and tenderness, like lambs jumping into a fire pit, allowing the demon venerable to refine them into elixirs that were sold at high prices. This was never a secret. It was just that no one had ever seen the true form of the demon venerable, and no one could punish the demon venerable. even the guardian of the heavenly gate didn't care. No one knew if it was because they had suffered a loss from the demon venerable, or if the demon venerable was like Lin Yuan, giving them a large amount of benefits, and thus didn't want to care about it. Looking at the legends and novels, most of the almighty people saw the people as livestock. When a piece was placed, no matter how many innocent people were implicated, they would not be moved at all. In the journey to the west, the heavenly emperor was able to prevent rain from falling for 3 years because the governor of Fengxian County had knocked over his tribute. How could he have imagined what kind of purgatory Fengxian County would become after 3 years? Some people said that these almighty people were heartless and treated the people as grass, and that they themselves were beast-like existences. But the current Lin Yuan had a different view. After all, he was half a step into the realm of almighty people. It was just that he still had some stubbornness in his heart. Furthermore, he had not cultivated for a long time, so he seemed to have some human characteristics and still had some bottom line. To be more realistic, most of the cultivators came from the mortal world. But once they succeeded in their cultivation, they were different from immortals and mortals. They could go into seclusion for more than 100 years. By the time they came out of seclusion, most of the people they knew would have turned into dust. So what if their bloodline was still in the world? Those people were no longer people they knew. Year after year, the human side of them became less and less. In the end, they became people who had forgotten their emotions. If it were those ordinary people, they would not give up the benefits that they could easily obtain for some people they did not know. Just like Lin Yuan. When he first came to this world, although he had the body of a demonic beast, he still thought of himself as a human. In order to survive, he could eat wild beasts and demonic beasts alive. He would also save a human because of a moment of kindness. But now, Lin Yuan found it hard to convince himself that he was still a human. Of course, he still had some conscience and bottom line, so he set up the new law of the northern frontier. He wanted to build a world where humans and demonic beasts lived together. However, it was expected that as he grew older, Lin Yuan's human side would quickly fade away. Perhaps one day in the future, he would also become an existence that regarded human life as worthless. Just like the game between Taishang and Haotian, the Great Qin Empire wiped out the 6 countries, and countless fresh lives were turned into yellow soil and withered bones. Perhaps one day, he would also be like that, playing a game with an unknown existence. With a single thought, countless ordinary people would pay the price of their lives. Perhaps there was a trace of unwillingness, therefore, Lin Yuan did his best to build the northern frontier, set up the Willowstone Ocean, and built the things that he was familiar with in his previous life. He wanted to leave behind more karma and do his best to preserve his human side. How sad would it be to exist purely as a god? Chapter 906. But Lin Yuan was still quite interested in the news of Qingjiang's southern desolation. Not to mention that Qingjiang Demon Venerable wanted to extend his hand into the northern frontier. Even if he stayed in southern desolation, Lin Yuan would find a way to find trouble with him. Once Willowshire Sea Area's city of trade was established, with his previous life's business philosophy, the convenient transportation formation, and the absolutely safe logistics, he would be able to sweep through the endless sea in a short time. Then he would be able to enter the outer sea area without competing with those demon beasts for territory. Just like the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce in Hengduan Mountain Range, he would be able to easily open a trade route. At that time, all the enemies in front of him would have to be dealt with cleanly. Shenwu Dynasty's southern desolation would have to be in his hands, and he would also have to take down Qingjiang Imperial Dynasty, who was proficient in naval warfare, to ensure that the things he transported from the endless sea would not be intercepted. That demon venerable in southern desolation was naturally on the list of people to kill. That's right, southern desolation has always been famous for its goo techniques. Many of my subordinates had once gone to Gold Squandering Cave to buy evil goo, and among them, there was a goo item that had a similar effect. It resides in the host's body and can continuously read the host's memories and transmit them to the goo master of southern desolation. At that time, the goo master of southern desolation would contact the guard of Demon Venerable's arsenal and choose a suitable cultivation method to transmit to the host through the goo item. When the host obtains a suitable cultivation method, his cultivation would naturally advance by leaps and bounds. But as the evil goo grows bigger, its appetite would naturally increase as well. At first, the evil goo would only occasionally steal a trace of primeval chi into the stomach, but once it matures, it would swallow all the primeval chi and astral chi in the host's body, even going deep into the chi sea and completely eating the host into a cripple. After that, this demonic goo will hibernate in the host's body for half a year. If the host remains a cripple in this half a year, the demonic goo will leave the Dantian Chi Sea and eat the host's body until it becomes an empty shell, then the goo masters of Southern Desolation will retrieve it. If the host has a fortuitous encounter, the demonic goo will copy the fortuitous encounter and send it back to the demon venerable's arsenal, then devour the host completely. It can be said to be extremely cruel. Su Yan's voice was somewhat cold as he smiled and said, "Your current situation is similar to an evil parasite entering your body. I heard that the Black Jiao had caused quite a commotion in the Endless Sea. If it obtains this evil parasite, you won't be able to endure it. Then, what should I do now?" Lei Fan's voice was trembling, as though he was extremely terrified. However, Su Yan smiled disdainfully and said mockingly, "The so-called goo art is just a small Dao. If goo art is really that powerful, how can orthodox cultivators run amok? It is only the Southern Desolation that has a strange terrain and climate that allows goo worms to breed. If you can suppress the greed in your heart and not cultivate that cultivation technique, the demonic goo will not be awakened. As time passes, the demonic goo will naturally starve to death and will not harm your life. But, when that demonic goo dies, your cultivation technique will have no foundation and will automatically disperse from your sea of consciousness." To a cultivator, cultivation methods were absolutely crucial. Because of an incomplete secular scripture, Daoist Red Cloud had been stuck at half-step void nether realm for half his life. Every year, he had to invest real gold and silver into the money-squandering cave to see if he could complete secular assembly. After meeting Lin Yuan, he did not even have to think about it and bet secular assembly on it. Moreover, the cultivation techniques deduced from secular assembly scripture, regardless of their grade, were the most suitable for the cultivator. If one cultivated according to the scripture, as long as one was not born with a crippled body, their cultivation efficiency would be doubled with half the effort and their battle strength would far surpass those of the same stage. If Lei Fan was willing to give up on such a cultivation technique, that would be strange. Such a temptation was not something that anyone could resist. "May I ask the exalted deity, is there any other way?" Lei Fan raised an eyebrow and clasped his hands together towards Su Yan, who had come out from the shadows, his eyes filled with unwillingness. He was a descendant of the imperial family of the Shinwu dynasty. Even if he was from a side branch, his eyesight was extraordinary. Although his cultivation was not deep, but he knew clearly how rare the cultivation technique in his sea of consciousness was. He could even say with certainty that if he missed out on such an opportunity, he would not be able to find another cultivation technique that was on par with it in his entire life. Ha! The same light laughter came from Lin Yuan and Su Yan at the same time. Having said that, Lin Yuan could see through Su Yan's tricks. Not to mention whether the Southern Wasteland sinister goo really existed, Su Yan was obviously coveting the cultivation technique of secular assembly scripture. After all, after entering the host's body, it could automatically evolve into a cultivation technique that was suitable for the host. Only Lin Yuan, who had cultivated the real secular assembly scripture, could only covet it. Otherwise, if such an opportunity was placed in front of him, he would not let it go so easily. Relax your mind and let me enter your sea of consciousness to explore and see what kind of cultivation technique the Black Jiao had imparted to you is. At the same time, I will see if there are any goo worms in your body. If there are, I will kill them for you. But I will not completely remove them. I will wait until you have recorded down the cultivation technique in your sea of consciousness before I will completely remove them. What do you think?" Su Yan spread out his two black palms and said with a smile, "Of course, you can also take it that I am coveting your cultivation technique. So, you can totally reject me. But this is your only chance. You will have to bear all the consequences." Lin Yuan could disconnect the connection of the secular assembly scripture at any time to ensure that Su Yan would not be able to find any trace of it. But thinking about it, the secular assembly scripture was a two-way thing. Don't look at how others who cultivated the secular assembly scripture would get a cultivation technique that was specially tailored for them. But just like that gentle village, there was no such thing as a free lunch in the world. You have to give up something to gain something. Those who cultivated the secular assembly scripture would become one of the living beings. As long as he had accumulated enough power of the living beings, Lin Yuan would be able to replicate everything of Su Yan. Even if he could not use these things as he wished, at least he would be able to understand how powerful his enemy was. As the saying goes, know yourself and know your enemy, and you will not be defeated in 100 battles. Who would give up a chance to study their opponent thoroughly? On the other side, Lei Fan thought about it for a moment and finally made up his mind. He said in a deep voice, I am ready. May the exalted deity please check if there are any goo worms in my body. Very quickly, a strange force penetrated deep into the secular assembly scripture. Obviously, Su Yan's actions were faster than Lin Yuan had expected, and he was also more impatient. Almost at the same time Lei Fan's voice fell, he had already made his move, wanting to get his hands on this strange cultivation technique. However, Lin Yuan was thinking about another thing at this time. Shadow Demon Su Yan, why did he have the method to create immortals? Chapter 907. When Su Yan invaded Lei Fan's Sea of Consciousness, it was just as Lin Yuan had expected. The first thing Su Yan did was not to check on Lei Fan. Instead, Su Yan went straight for the ball of information that recorded the contents of the life scripture. After completely copying it down, Su Yan did not cultivate it immediately. Instead, he turned his head and started to continuously channel energy into Lei Fan's body, checking if there were any abnormalities within Lei Fan's body. Lin Yuan muttered to himself for a moment before he finally understood the reason behind Su Yan's actions. A cultivation technique of the level of the life scripture was something that even gods would not be able to avoid coveting. However, what Su Yan had said about the southern wasteland evil goo should not be baseless. After obtaining this cultivation technique, he naturally would not cultivate it immediately. Other than checking on Lei Fan, he also wanted to see if there were any abnormalities after Lei Fan cultivated it. This kind of action was in line with the style of an evil god. After all, the power of incense was the most precious resource in a world. Those high and mighty big shots, in order to prevent more fake gods from appearing and competing with them for the power of incense, had set up a threshold, causing the cultivation realm of the heaven martial world to stop at the void realm. They had also divided the human factions into different empires. Every expert of the Heaven's Gate Guardian should have a territory where they could harvest the power of incense. Those resources that they had plundered were only for the sake of nurturing their own juniors. Whether or not they had it, they did not really care. However, the power of incense was different. Even the powerful dragon race of the four seas could only breed their own tribes to obtain the power of incense. It was even more so for the human race, whose forces were intertwined with one another. If they did not even have enough for themselves, how could they share it with other cultivators? This was especially so for someone like Su Yan, who was not a Heaven's Gate Guardian. He had found another way to obtain the faith of the assassins of the heaven martial world. However, this was still considered as competing with the real big shots for incense. If he did not have an exquisite heart, he would have long been killed by others. It seemed like there wouldn't be any harvest in the near future. Lin Yuan sighed faintly and wrapped his arms around Lei Qiusheng's shoulders again. Let's go back first and go our separate ways after we pass through the forest of hungry ghosts. You go to the Wei River battle line and tell them to leave some emergency personnel behind. There's no need to waste everyone there. The demon cult in the south is most likely done for. Without these allies, the sky demon won't let go of this fat piece of meat in the south. They won't do something as stubborn as biting down on the northern frontier. Therefore, other than those on duty, everyone should immediately go to the northern frontier prince's residence and await orders. Lei Qiusheng nodded slightly. His figure moved, and he once again swept in the direction of the forest of hungry ghosts. Yang Qinglin stood in place silently for a moment. He stretched out his hand and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. With a flip of his right hand, he tightly clenched a small broken blood-colored banner and cursed, "This time, it's a big loss." Putting the small blood-colored banner back into his sleeve, Yang Qinglin took 2 deep breaths. He turned into a blood-colored streak of light and chased after Lei Qiusheng, who was gradually getting further and further away. After the group had completely left, only then did Red Cloud open his eyes and look at Luo Yu, who was flying in the sky. He jokingly said, "Did you see that? That guy is showing off." Luo Yu was silent for a moment. He sneered and said, "That guy has one of the fragments of the 6-soul banner. Although it's not as powerful as it used to be, it's getting more and more terrifying in the world of heaven and martial arts. If he really wrote our names on it, I'm afraid that he would immediately be erased from the world of heaven and martial arts and lose his life." The 6-soul banner was a treasure that was very difficult to grade. It used to be the most precious treasure of Tongtian. By writing the opponent's name on the tail of the banner, he would use a talisman to worship it in the morning and evening. On the day of worship, he would wave the banner and change the world of heaven and earth. A complete 6-soul banner with 6 tails could take away the lives of 6 people. Even the immortal saints could not escape the fate. In the original Book of Investiture of the Gods, Tongtian wrote the names of Jie Yin Taoist, Zhuanti Taoist, Laozi, Yuanshi, King Wu, and Jiang Shang on the tail of the banner. Among the 6 people, there were 4 saints. It could be seen that the power of this treasure was enormous. It could even be said that the 10,000 Immortals formation was not the killing move of Jie's sect, but the 6-soul banner was. However, Tongtian lost in the end. Long-Ears Dingguang Immortal, who was responsible for waving the banner after the 10,000 Immortals formation was activated, defected, and joined the camp of Yuanshi Tianzuan together with the 6-soul banner. As a result, Jie's sect, which was not inferior to Ren's sect and Chan's sect, was dragged into the calamity. Only Divine Mother, who was not tainted by the calamity, escaped under the hint of Tongtian. In the investiture of the gods' tribulation, if Long-Ears Dingguang Immortal really waved the banner, he dared not say that Jie's sect would definitely win, but it was still unknown who would win. However, as a forbidden treasure, the 6-soul banner could not be used casually. Every time the banner was waved, part of the holder's primordial spirit would be devoured by the resentment of the 3,000 demon gods. In the last battle of Jie's sect, the 10,000 Immortals formation was their trump card. The participants could be said to have a slim chance of survival. However, those who waved the 6-soul banner would definitely die. Moreover, their primordial spirit would be devoured and they could not even enter the reincarnation cycle. Unless a saint paid a great price to reconstruct their true spirit, only then could they enter the reincarnation cycle. Although Long-Ears Dingguang Immortal's escape had caused Jie's sect to suffer, his escape was not purely because he was afraid of death. What was more terrifying than death was having one's soul dispersed and not entering the reincarnation cycle. Jie's sect. TSK, Taoist Red Cloud shook his head. His face was gloomy as he said coldly, "They're all difficult to deal with. However, I don't know if this kid had obtained a fragment of the 6-soul banner by chance or if it was a spark that Tongtian's sect master had placed in another world in advance because he knew that he could not suppress the fate of Jie's sect." Although the blood-red banner in Yang Qinglin's hand was only a fragment of the 6-soul banner, it was definitely an invincible existence in the current Tianwu world. If Yang Qinglin was really angered, he could wave the 6-soul banner and exchange a life for a life. Even Taoist Red Cloud would be wiped out directly. Then Luo Yu seemed to have thought of something as his eyelids twitched violently. Taoist Red Cloud raised his right hand and stopped Luo Yu from speaking. He said indifferently, "Although we don't have a good relationship with the Black Jiao, the Black Jiao had borrowed the name of the demon court. Today, we saved his life. This karma has already been set. Even if we don't do anything now, if the heavenly Tao wants to get rid of us in the future, he will have to protect us." At this point, Taoist Red Cloud took back the 99 soul dissipating gourd that was hovering above his head and hung it on his waist again. His eyes shone brightly as he turned to the east and said in a deep voice, "After the northern frontier recuperates, the black Jiaos lay out in the south and the endless sea